Good evening. It is the Geeky Gamer Podcast with Bill and Ken and our guest tonight, Juliet. We are streaming live exactly at 7 exactly 7 p.m. Eastern on time every Thursday.
Like clockwork.
Feel like we're never late. Scored this week by all lowercase letters and Mr. Interrupt. Thanks to our Patreon, Tim Roberts, Daniel Hulker, Nostalgic, and Natalia Cline. Production by Couchfire Media. And art, as well as content and materials and such by Terrible Productions.
Whoever they are.
Bill.
No one knows.
Introduce yourself if you want.
Yeah. Hey, Juliet, who are you?
I'm Juliet.
Yeah. Juliet Rose. We met on Pod Match. Sparks flew.
Pod Match.
Juliet, tell us a little bit about yourself. I hate that question, but I'm going to ask it to you.
I hate that question too.
Terrible question.
So, I am Juliet. I am an author. I am a native New Yorker who currently lives in the mountains of North Georgia. Much warmer down here, so I like that.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, that's really about it. I rescue dogs and do a lot of work. I never stop moving. I'm a little bit of like OCD probably. Yeah.
Well, your podcast. Thanks for coming by.
Yep, and see you later.
See you later.
Georgia.
Georgia. I mean, I've been in Georgia. Maybe the worst drivers I've experienced.
Oh my God.
And I lived in LA for a long time, so
yeah, I'm from Long Island, so I've been through New York City, and my uncle came to visit at one point, and he had to go through Atlanta. Of course, he goes from New Jersey to New York City through New York City all the time, and had to come through Atlanta, and he said, "Oh my gosh, they are the worst drivers." And I was like, "That says a lot." If somebody that goes through New York all the time goes that way,
and it's not just Atlanta. You go to Northeast Georgia, and they'll cruise in the fast lane, going real slow.
Yeah. They got the HOV lane up in there. Yeah. What does HOV actually stand for?
I think that's the quick pass, isn't it? Where you like.
Yeah, but what does it actually stand for? Does anyone know?
I mean, V would be
no. No. What is it? What is it? Yeah, but I don't know the HOV. HO. Human only vehicles. No.
Whoa.
I don't know what it stands for. I've wondered many times, specifically going through Atlanta. What a wild question. I know.
I don't know.
Listen, tangents are my native tongue. Why'd you move to Georgia? I'm not trying to diss Georgia or anything, but
no, sometimes it needs to be. There's definitely some things in Georgia that were very much an adjustment from moving from New York. I actually moved all over the country. I've lived probably at least half the states. Been in Mexico, lived in Mexico.
Yeah, Mexico's a state.
So, yeah, right.
Well, the new one is
New Mexico, yeah. But yeah, so I moved to Georgia because I had actually come here as a teenager, and I got to a camp up in the mountains, and I just love everything kind of like that goes along with that. It's like whitewater rafting, canoeing, hiking, and so kind of a time came in my life. I was like, I want to move somewhere, and so I chose North Georgia because I really just love the mountains.
Yeah, right on. So you're in Appalachia.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Well, both Ken and I are from kind of the hills. Ken, you're more like a farmer guy though, from the Western Kentucky.
Yeah, I am in Western Kentucky.
Fucking rednecks.
I go hilltoppers.
I'm not much better. I'm not even from the east of Kentucky. Like, I'm not even a hillbilly. I'm like a not even city slicker, just in the middle.
You said your family was from Breathitt County, which I think my family's from Breathitt County as well.
We're probably related.
Part of it. Definitely related. Let's not have children together.
Yeah. No,
I say my latest book takes place in Kentucky. So.
Well, tell us a bit.
I was
about
reading
your
that. I was reading that one of your books actually came from Kentucky.
It did.
What's it about? What is your book? Tell us your book.
So I have this book. It takes place in Kentucky. It's kind of like it's weird because I'm cross genre, so it's really hard for me to like nail down genres. But it gets into like probably like magical realism, mystery. So the main character, when he's 18, he and his girlfriend are walking home to her home, and she ends up getting murdered. He turns, goes back home. She heads up towards her house, never makes it. 13 years later, he's a raging alcoholic, still living with his father.
So he's a millennial.
Yeah. Actually, it would be no, because he would be like my age now. So, because this starts out in the 80s and then goes to the 90s.
I see.
Because I didn't want to have technology play into it because he starts seeing this creature in the woods. And at first he's like, is it Kentucky Wild Man? It's not. So I won't get too much into it. So basically he decides that he thinks this creature killed his girlfriend. So he goes hunting it.
I see.
But really the story has a lot to do with his own journey mentally for, his guilt and his grief. And so,
that's cool.
It was in Kentucky. And originally I did because I wanted to kind of tie in the Kentucky Wild Man, but it evolved as I wrote it. And that just became kind of more of a misplacement. He thinks that's what it is, but it's not.
What is the Kentucky Wild Man?
Like Bigfoot. He's like this guy that people say they see with red eyes and kind of looks like a man, kind of looks like Bigfoot. And so originally I was going to do that. I was kind of thinking along those lines, and then I veered off that. So
you made your own choices. Here's a question about Bigfoot. Does Bigfoot talk?
Everything I've ever read, and that's interesting because I did a lot of research initially thinking I was going that way. And so there's a Bigfoot museum near us, and they have like everything, like recordings and like pictures and a lot of grunts and screams, but not really talking.
Never talking, huh? Interesting.
There was no video of talking. Yeah.
I mean, I have this short that I'm about to do where the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch talks for like, I don't know, 15 minutes, but apparently that's not something we need to buy into.
Like Bigfoot purists, they have a problem with it.
They don't buy into
it. That's kind of part of it, though. That you wouldn't expect him to talk. Anyway, so that's one of your books, and what is it called?
It's called By the Dimming Light.
Yeah, I was going to say The Dimming Light. That sounded familiar. I didn't realize. So, are your most recent books on your website? Are they towards the bottom of the page for some reason?
So it starts with the first, then goes down to like my most recent at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so he goes hiking. He goes hiking. Solve the murder of his girlfriend. Yeah.
So basically, he sees this creature and is convinced that creature killed her. So he's going to go kill it. He thinks that his family's in danger and that he's got to kill this creature, and it would take care of her murder too. But then he also would keep his family safe. There's a lot of layers into it. Like a family moves in next door, and there's some sketchy stuff going on, and he somehow ends up with the custody of the small child that they have. And I'll leave it at that because I don't want to get into too much detail. So he takes this child with him into the woods, into the national forest to
Sounds like a good move.
This creature.
And how does,
making good decisions.
I mean, I'm not going too deep into it, but how does alcoholism connect to this story? And is there an allegory between the Sasquatch and alcohol? Like is that enough, or is that too much?
Who's to say? But yeah, so he becomes an alcoholic because of his girlfriend's murder, and he's just not able to cope with life. So that's
okay.
Instead of killing himself, he's basically killing himself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's addiction. I mean, that's how it's coping or not coping, I guess. Can we rewind a little bit? So this is a Geeky Gamer podcast, and we do like to talk about games sometimes. So do you have any gaming experience in your life? Board RPG, video games?
Yeah, anything? I mean, definitely. I'm not good at it. I won't lie. I'll sit at a table and jump in on it, but I always lose. It's just I'm not good at it. I'm usually the first one to be killed in anything at any point. Like, honestly, it is. Like, my kids laugh about it because like, oh, well, Mom's dead again. I'm not good at it.
In a video game or like just
Video
all
games?
games in general. If it's a board
like-
game, it
like if
doesn't
they
matter.
release Yeah, it really doesn't matter.
No, is it that because you don't want to play anymore? Or is it?
No,
Is
I
that
would love to be good at it.
a-
I'm not, and I think that was kind of why I pulled away from it, was because I wasn't good at it. Like I said, my brother growing up were really close in age, and so my mother introduced us to like D&D when we were like probably like 7 and 8 years old, because we were just a year apart. And he just got it, like he understood it. He started shoplifting books and dice and all kinds of stuff. You know, I'm not gonna lie, he did. He'd go in a big winter coat and shove everything down in there, and
Still does.
and we'd play, and I don't know if like he was cheating the whole time, and he would always beat me, because he would always beat me, and I just would get frustrated. So
Yeah, he's cheating.
Sure.
yeah,
It sounds like he was cheating.
He cheated at
but-
everything. So.
But
100%.
it also sounds like, you know, he was just being mean because
Well, he's an older
don't think-
brother, right? That's the
Right.
Well, tell me about your D&D experience. You say your mom introduced you to D&D, to Dungeons and Dragons. This would have been like the first or second edition, I'm assuming.
It was
Like when it-
70s, late 70s.
Yeah, so it's like like when it came out.
When it came out. Yeah, she was really excited about it, because my mother was really geeky too. I mean, she just loved that type of stuff. So she got us all sat down. We're gonna do family game night, and she brought out the game stuff, and then she actually brought out like Jello and flopped it down like on one of the pages, and like it's the Blob or something. Like I remember that. 'Cause I was like, what is my mother doing? You know,
That
like,
is
I didn't
awesome.
understand.
So,
yeah, so
did she go to like the conventions with, you know, the people that made specifically Generation Con, Gen Con, Gary Gygax, all that crap?
no, we just like
She just had the book. That's
just had it,
wild.
and then
That's wild.
And like I said, my brother just immediately caught on. He really loved it, and I'd play, because I mean I liked it, but not to the level like he just understood it. Like he would build campaigns and stuff, and I would just be like, "Sure, I'm like this little guy, whatever you like." I just wasn't, you know. And so I was easy to kill.
So he would run the games,
Oh yeah.
and if you played in his games, he would kill you.
Oh, I died every time. I was always the first.
Yeah,
like
but
he'd have his friends come over, and then I would always just be out. Maybe he did it because he didn't want me around his friends. I don't know, you know, because I was his little sister, pain in the ass, you know. So sorry, I'm just say that.
No, please curse as much as possible.
Yeah, do it. But it sounds to me like he wasn't playing correctly. I think you have an experience of bullying. and
There
There were
not
no
an
bullies back
experience
then. That's bullying. That's a new word, Ken.
playing the game.
Yeah, that was just what my brothers did. You know?
That's just what they did. So
Lucky
yeah,
that.
I mean, I don't because it's about it. You're not supposed to kill your characters. I mean, that's kind of the thing. That's the way that people play now. It's about getting your demons out, not like creating more.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what it's
Well, we
kind
were
of turned
kids,
into.
too, so I'm sure, like, yeah.
Well,
do you,
old school D&D, like old school revival. It's called OSR now. Basically, games that harken back to the original way that you were play. It's supposed to be super deadly, but it's interesting that you mentioned you felt like or feel like you would lose at these games, because like Ken was saying, nowadays there's this mentality of you can't really lose so long as you're telling a story, right? So part of your story could be that you lose, that your character dies or whatever. In the old school, I guess maybe you're just trying to survive. You're trying to get through the dungeon, and if your brother was running the game and he's like, and the monster steps on you, then you know, what can you do? Would you be willing to play one of those games again, or are they kind of out of bounds now?
No, I would, because I think that, you know, recognizing that I was having an experience that maybe wasn't authentic as a kid definitely lets me know that I didn't understand the game as it's meant to be played. You know, so yeah, I definitely would.
It sounds like you've had an interesting experience, because my introduction to tabletop role-playing games, TTRPGs, is entirely different. I had a degree when I started playing. You know, like I was a goddamn adult, you know, acting like a fucking wizard. And it's wild to me that your parent was like, check out the Devil's Game, because that's about the time, right? That it was like, this is Satan's, cauldron or whatever. How did you guys do? Tell me about that. That's interesting.
Well, my mother she was out there. So she was a hippie. She was like very outspoken at the time. So like in the 70s when women were supposed to kind of be home and like looking for the family and stuff, she went to nursing school. She loaded me up and took me to Washington, D.C. to march in the Equal Rights Amendment parade on Washington. She was very much like not like women at the time. I don't really remember her having a lot of female friends because of that. Like she tended to not really fall into those groups. She was very intelligent. And so she was always kind of like challenging us to think differently. And so I think that really excited her. This wasn't just like checkers, it was something where you were really digging into a process, and she enjoyed that. She wanted it to go further. So she always was bringing us those experiences. She was the one that bought the RV, and we went across country when I was a kid and just stayed at hippie campgrounds and kind of did that for a year. And she's like, we're going to school you just write in a journal every day. I'm like, cool. School. So like, I liked it. But yeah, just being raised by somebody like that, it was really beneficial because I didn't think like people at that time. I was raised with somebody that really broadened my horizons.
Did you come up some of the stories that you write now? I mean, are any of them influenced by your time playing those games?
Yeah, like the whole.
I mean, you were talking Sasquatch. I mean, that's a super net. Of course, it's real in Oregon or something, but it's not real here in Kentucky.
Just to say, But yeah. So no, I mean, definitely just all of my experiences with my mother definitely play a lot into my stories. Because again, she was somebody that like everything we did was an adventure. That's just how she lived her life until she passed away. And she passed away young. So she passed away when I was 11. So up until that point, everything we did was always just like, let's try it out. Let's go do this. And so like those experiences definitely play into my stories. Where I went, even being in an RV, like I use that in my stories as well. Because we were always on an adventure.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, I noticed that is a reoccurring theme in a lot of the books you have that you've written. You've got a couple of characters that are kind of out in a moment, and they kind of are faced with this adversity, but they're always out. They're journeying. You've got a firefighter fighting fires. You've got a my computer is just
search and rescue and firefighters.
You've got I was gonna say backwoods and time travel. The hiker in Kentucky. There's definitely a lot of outdoor activity in your books.
They're not staying home. They're on a journey. I think in every book, they're on some form of journey, whether it's through their job or just through an experience they have. They go on this journey. I don't really write about, people in the next door neighbors as much. Now, the latest book starts out that way, because obviously he's dealing with his next door neighbors, but then he goes on this journey into the national forest. So.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because I didn't go hiking or out into the world until more or less in the last 10 years. Like I didn't even think, hey, this is not a cool place to go. And then now that I'm going out and hiking and stuff like that, I do appreciate those realities. I do notice that it's a circumstance in some of your books that brings two people together. And are these did you say this before? Are these romance novels? I mean, it seems like some are definitely like the firefighter one, like sexy firefighter.
That one I actually do when I classify. I do say action adventure romance because it does have romance. I have books that don't have any. Obviously, about half my books have no relationships, and about half my books have relationships, depending on different degrees. Very few of them I'd actually classify as romance, though, because it's like kind of a buried genre versus like what the main point is. So like even with the firefighters, it's really more action adventure. Romance plays into it, but a lot of it has to do with wildland firefighting.
Or like, a deaf dog handler meets a medic, and they're just it's about communication, I guess.
That one was tricky about communication, because having to write a deaf character.
Yeah, how do you write a deaf person?
That was tough. I actually did it wrong at first. I joined some different groups online that were deaf or deaf supporting, and so I initially did it one way. Oops, sorry, I just hit my desk. I did it one way, and then I asked a question like, "Yeah, that wouldn't happen. You got to fix that," because they don't use contractions. So I was like, "How would you say, would you like to have dinner?" Like, "Yeah, nope, we don't say that. We say dinner, eat." That type of thing. And I had to go back and actually change my wording and a lot of stuff to make it actually more authentic, yet keeping some of it so that the reader's not like reading chopped up dialogue.
I was gonna say, because go on.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, it's tough. You don't want the reader being like, okay, this is wearing on my head because I'm having to read this chopped up dialogue for 300 pages. So it really had to just kind of find a middle ground where I was keeping the authentic dialogue, but
there are a lot of deaf readers out there, and like
everyone knows deaf people don't read, Ken. Jesus.
It's just Lord, I just feel the vibrations.
So there's the
we are gonna get canceled.
Train Spotting, which I haven't read. I watched the movie. My brother read it. He's the one that can read. I'm illiterate. He told me that it was written in Brogue. So like it's written, right? And that the book that you've written kind of reminds me of that. Like, how do you strike that balance to where it's like, I can't read this out loud. That doesn't make sense. Ha! What do I do? Right?
Yeah, so I had to do things where it was very similar to the dialogue that the other characters were having. But what I did to kind of create a separation mentally was I literally removed contractions. So instead of saying wouldn't, I would have the character say would not, the deaf character. Because what I was trying to do is show that he was having to basically sound out or spell out everything he was doing instead of being able to do that. So it was a simple little thing that I did, but I did it because I was like, I just want to have this differentiation.
That's like data. I get it. You don't use contractions.
Yeah, and then his speech is going to be much more simplistic because, again, they don't add a lot of flowery stuff. They're really clear about how they're communicating. And so I just made sure when he was communicating, he was just really forthright.
Right. So he read lips, and he spoke. But
he read lips somewhat, but it is definitely a misconception that all deaf people can read lips or that they can read all words. They can't.
Oh, sure. Well, I can read lips, so I
can a little bit, but it depends on the people's how they move their mouths. Some people like talk like this; they really don't move their mouth around. So it's a lot harder than having somebody really clearly enunciate. And I did address that because something you see in Hollywood, every deaf person reads lips. It's not true. I think it's like 40% maybe do. Yeah. And they can't read everybody's lips or every word. So you still have to be really clear.
They make the best spies for that reason, actually.
And like the heroin addiction, did that play a lot into, like, why did you choose that as a background for that character?
Or for the firefighter character?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, one, I wanted to address states using prisoners as wildland firefighters. So that kind of started with that because it's something that, I've read about, and I was just like, I really wanted to address that factor. Why do states do that? What is the outcome? How does it really impact the lives of those people that are doing that? So obviously I had to have the main character have been in prison. But I really wanted to get into like addiction in that one, and confidence, things like that, because she did go to prison for heroin. She got in prison, she became a wildland firefighter. When she got out, she became a supervisor. So I wanted to have kind of like that thing, but then the other character is diabetic. So I really kind of wanted to get into like, I guess those flaws, like where people are having to deal with this extra thing. Like she's still thinking about heroin even when she's out there fighting a fire, like that's where her brain is. And so like I wanted to address that, and then having this other character that's fighting for his life, having to use a needle when she's trying to take her life, having to use the needle. I really wanted to do this kind of like comparison of growth. So that's why I chose to do that.
Why I had no idea that was a thing. I'm not about heroin, but about prisons.
You know about heroin.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some heroin in a second. But what? I'm going deep in the paint tonight, y'all. What's the deal with prisons? I had no idea that was it. Even tell me, educate
me.
It is.
It is. Especially you see it a lot the Southwest states, California, Nevada, Arizona, they'll use prisoners to go and fight these wildland firefighters because, let's face it, they're free. So they're really not getting paid to do it. They're not getting paid. It's free, so they can use prisoners to go fight.
Well, they get paid. They get paid like just a few cents.
Right, that doesn't count though. Actually getting paid. Like,
wait, they use prisoners as slave labor.
Yeah, pretty much,
these fucking liberals.
I mean, but that's a thing. That's a thing. That's like
not just wildland firefighters. You really get into that. That's a whole other conversation. But
that is wild.
That is that they're
no pun. Oh, no pun intended.
Leave people in prison, make them do work, because they're prisoners. So, so that's why I really wanted to address that, because it was something that, you know, it's a deadly game, fighting fires. I've seen. I'm sorry, my dogs have lost their minds. I don't know.
Oh, it's fun. Everybody, dogs.
So I wanted to address it, but I wanted to address it by creating a character that you could follow and understand and see how she got addicted to heroin, how she ended up in prison, why it still kind of got a grip on her. And so that was really what I wanted to focus on. But it originally came from an article that NPR did about wildland firefighters, prisoners being used.
Wow. So I'm sorry, I'm stuck on it. So I understand the idea of civil service, right? Like, you kind of have to give back to society. Is that where it's like chain gang style shit, or like what?
That's what they're doing, but I can't say if that's the motivation for why they're doing it. I still think financially is the motivation for why they do it.
Huh? Does it play into what are they called? For-profit prisons.
I mean, prisons are for profit. They're privatized, so they're going to try to make money off those prisoners any way they can, whether it's from the taxpayers or the prisoners themselves.
Whoa. Okay, so
I know a lot about that too.
Yeah, no, I'm interested. So this character, she gets put away for heroin, just doing it or selling it, or.
So she's basically, a raid goes through a house where they are selling and using, and so she just gets arrested. So whether or not she was selling it herself, which she wasn't, but she was with the people that were, so she got arrested. Yeah.
And then she goes through, like, you know, the indentured servitude. And then when she gets out of prison, because she has the experience, she then becomes like a firefighter captain or something, supervisor.
Yeah. So they basically offer those that did it in prison. It's the same thing, kind of like a work after prison option. And so she chooses it because she doesn't have anything to go back to. So she chooses to be a supervisor.
And she can't get a job elsewhere.
Well, it'd be pretty tough. Yeah.
Now, is she? Is all of that prologue? Or is it exposition type stuff that you actually go through in the book, or has that already happened? Is that just her backstory?
When the book starts, she is now out as a supervisor. So the prologue kind of gets into the prologue in the book actually gets into the system, like why they do it, what they do, you know, with prisoners. So that's kind of explaining, because a lot of people don't know that, like you said, you didn't know.
Sure.
So I want to make sure I kind of explained how people get into this. And so then the book then starts, once you do the prologue and explains it, with her, she's now a supervisor and she's leading her own team. And that's where it starts, is literally her leading a crew in Arizona to fight this wildfire. And then as it goes through the story, obviously, it kind of she'll go back, reflect back on experiences and things like that. So it'll kind of bring it into that as well.
Are you saying something with that? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ken, but are you saying something with that? Is it more in the background? Are you just presenting it?
Saying something with her being a wildland firefighter, or?
So how it actually, because it's a work of fiction, right? Mm-hmm. But it's using something in reality. It's sort of set in a kind of realistic setting. So how much of your own opinion about this practice is communicated? Is that on the forefront?
Sorry, all of it. Yeah, like I definitely in the forefront, because one of the things I try to do if I'm going to bring in a social issue is it is going to definitely be my opinion, how I feel about that social issue. So the characters are really experiencing, from my point of view, what I think that experience would be like.
Right. Which means you agree with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll sometimes play a little bit of a devil advocate to try to like show that, but ultimately the story's still going to go with what I believe.
I dig. Yep. Awesome. Yes, Ken. You may go.
Are there supernatural moments in this, real or imagined?
So in certain books,
like and prick the needle specifically, like is because that seems very down to earth.
It
like,
is down to earth.
activity.
Yeah. If I use supernatural in my contemporary fiction, it's usually in a dream sequence type of thing. Like I'll kind of get into that. Whereas my other books, like my horror books and my, time travel and my mystery or like that, they're going to have supernatural elements because I really like supernatural elements. And I'm actually shifting that way more as I write. Like every time I write a book, I feel like I'm getting more and more that way. Like this next book I'm going to write that I'm kind of playing with in my head right now is going to go sci-fi. It's going to be supernatural and sci-fi.
Oh, nice.
All the way.
Excellent. So we're going to go even deeper into the paint. We Don't Matter, which I think sounds like a really interesting book. I personally have been to a lot of protests, unbeknownst to Bill. And I think that is police brutality, church abuse, bigotry, and a skateboarder and a journalist. So I mean, I feel like that is that similar to like a lot of the themes that are happening in Prick of the Needle, or is that like I know that the skateboarder and the journalist are not necessarily drug users. They're going against the system, but it's going in the system in a different way.
Yeah, so especially in my earlier on books, so like say with Prick of the Needle, We Don't Matter, Trigger Point, Do Over, there's very similar themes of addiction and mental illness, and then it gets into usually a social issue. So in that social issue, so for example, We Don't Matter, obviously he's a film student, he captures police brutality on film, and they're on the run. It's also an LGBTQ book, so I really have a lot of different elements. Once he's on the run, his partner that he's with, they find, he kind of opens up and says, who's abused by the church. They were trying to push conversion therapy on him. So like it gets into a lot of, say, like hot button topics that are things I care about. And Prick of the Needle does too. They're just different topics. So I get into like Native American life in that one. I get into the prison system. I get into addiction. Addiction tends to come into a lot of my stories simply because it's something I've experienced a lot in my own life. So, it's something I'm very passionate about, not addiction, but helping people.
No pun intended. Indeed.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a captivating story that occurs a lot in our society, and it's hard to be an adult in this day and age to have not experienced abuse and addiction.
What is the definition? What is your definition? What is the definition of addiction?
Who, you're asking me?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're always asking you. If you don't know, we're asking you.
So my definition of addiction, honestly, is when it's out of your control. So when it is something that is owning you instead of you. So say, you want to have a glass of wine, whatever, you want to smoke a little weed, whatever. It's really when it gets to the point where it's no longer like I'm having one or whatever. It's owning you. Your literally life is to do that thing. That's addiction.
Sure. Are there degrees of it?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes people don't think they are addicted, but they have to go home after work every day and have that glass of wine. If it's controlling your life, it's an addiction, but it can control your life from something minute, having, you just can't go without a day without it, or you can't go seconds without it. So it really just depends, but yeah, there's definitely levels.
Is there a problem with that?
Is there a problem with being addicted?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately,
I know that sounds like a vapid question, but
no, if it's something you don't want or it's robbing you of your life, yes. But again, it's a personal thing. Anybody going through it's really going to have to make that decision on whether or not they feel like it's robbing them of their life. I would never make a blanket statement across the board because, again, I don't believe in that. Kind of like the prison system, I feel like we don't address the causes of addiction, what people are dealing with, and so you can't really say is it right or wrong, because if that's the only way they can cope, by all means, cope.
Let's address it.
But I think
what causes addiction?
Yeah, but I think if you're addicted to something, like you literally don't want to get out of it. Like you're in it. You want to be in it. You want to go back to that thing. So, personally, I remember I used to smoke cigarettes a long time ago. I was addicted and it took a lot. I didn't want to quit, but I did eventually. And I've known people who did a lot of ecstasy and other types of drugs, and they didn't quit, and they're dead. So I mean that they just you just keep going. An addiction oftentimes can kill you. So,
I mean, and a lot of things can be addiction. I mean, food could be an addiction. People kill themselves by overeating and they get a heart attack and die. So, like, again, it's really like, it's not about the vice as much as why are you going to that vice so hard? You know?
So, what causes addiction? Now, again, big question. It's not loaded, meaning there isn't an ulterior motive behind it. I just like to ask big stupid questions.
Everybody, no, it's not.
It's not a stupid question at all. I mean, it's something I've researched now for decades because it's. I've lost family members to it. Yeah, I was raised abused, and so, like, I've seen members of my family that also were raised abused lose their lives to it, just be consumed by it, where they no longer had a life. And so part of me was like, why wasn't I? You know, like I went through the same things. And I don't drink anymore. It was one of those things where I had to decide, like, I felt like I was going to it for the wrong reasons, because I was like, this will make me happy. Anytime you think something's going to make you happy, just stop, because it's not. Like, you're putting too much externally on something that they can't bring you that feelings. So I think a lot of it's lack of connection to that degree, or to the point of abuse. So, like, either you just always felt isolated, you don't really have a community, you just feel lonely. You're living in poverty, whatever it is, you're just feeling very isolated, all the way to the point of having dealt with something very traumatic. And that's the only way that you try to bury it. And that was really what I was doing, is I didn't want to think about my childhood. So I would just say, go home and have a few drinks every night. A few drinks turned into a couple bottles, and then I was like, this isn't healthy. And so I stopped. But it's taken family members of mine that didn't stop. So, like,
sure.
And I don't fault them. Like, ultimately, they went through that same abuse. They have those same terrible childhood memories. You know, like, without probably deep therapy or whatever, that's how they're coping. And I wish they wouldn't, because I want them around, but at the same point, I can't blame them.
Right. So that's a certain form of addiction. Pulling away from that, what about addiction to, like, something like coffee?
Again, I think it's the levels of what you're addicted to. Like, why are you drinking a cup of coffee? Because you like a cup of coffee, or because you think you can't live without it? You know, like, that's why.
Are you addicted to coffee?
I like coffee. I'm not. I mean, I can definitely go without it.
The answer is
yes.
But
I will say in the morning, if I don't have my coffee, like, it is one of those things where I'm like, yeah, tea's just not the same thing.
No.
When I quit drinking, I definitely got more attracted to coffee. Like, it became my kind of fill-in for alcohol.
Yeah.
So I would drink too much coffee.
This is why I ask about the definition of addiction. I was actually just in a conversation with my lady friend about addiction. And you know, the idea of, so sure, I'm addicted to coffee. I know, because if I don't have a coffee or caffeine for a day or two, I get a pretty gnarly headache. That's, from what I understand, a definition of, you know, physical addiction. But that's a completely different idea from if I'm addicted to cigarettes, or is it? Or addicted to heroin, or is it? And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
I think it goes back to those levels we were talking about before, where it's like, yes, is it an addiction, but is it ruling your life? Probably not. Like, are you going to lose your job because you're drinking coffee? Probably not. You're going to lose your job because you're doing heroin? Probably. You know, so you have to just look at those levels, like, how much is it controlling your life? So we have these addictions where we really, really want it, and then we have addictions where we really, really have to have it. And I think there's a difference.
And some of your books explore that.
Yeah, coffee especially. Like... Everybody's addicted. No, I'm kidding.
But it seems like there's a lot of redemption in your books when they're started. It's like they're former addicts, or they're former, like, that's just a part of their history. Am I wrong about that? Whereas they're not involved in the addictive part.
Like in the newest one, By the Dimming Light, he's definitely an alcoholic for the first section of the book. Like, he is. Like, this is ruling his life. This is making him make really bad decisions. And I really want to address that, because I've personally had somebody in my family literally go through that, and, like, I would beat my head against the wall being like, don't you want to, like, see the world? Don't you, like, do things? Like, do you want this? And I never got through. So I really wanted to kind of get into why somebody would continually go back to something that they knew was taking their life away from them. And so I addressed that in that book. And then in my first book, Do Over, one of the characters, he's an addict as well, but dealing with ketamine, because I wanted to really address ketamine in that book.
Interesting.
So this is ketamine that is recreational.
Right. Recreational ketamine.
Was it, what is it called? It's like Special K, or am I making that? That's something.
They call it Special K. Yeah, that's kind of a slang for it, is Special K. There's a K-hole, Special K, yeah. A lot when you're like looking up drugs online. So, and actually I'd never had an experience with ketamine until I had written a book. The book was out, and then last year I was hiking. I slipped on some gravel and shattered my leg. I had to be rescued through like an ATV, and they gave me ketamine to set my leg, and it was the worst experience. Like I felt like, why would anybody do this recreationally? I literally
your
felt like
leg
I was falling through.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't why. It was because like literally the feeling you get from it is like I felt like I was just falling through like layers of existence. It was bizarre.
Whoa.
I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, you kind of go down, but they use this stuff, ketamine, I think, for mental health.
They're starting to do
depression, PTSD, and that I felt like that was interesting. Where I know, because I was part of the rave culture for a while, that people did ketamine, and those people are not doing well today. But I also know that people, for their mental health with depression and stuff like that, so in recent years, it seems like it's in a much brighter light than I think when I was younger. I don't know any of the stats of how much access people have. Is that still a big party drug today, or even though there are?
It is. It's still definitely a party drug today, mostly in the club scene.
Sure.
But and people have been prescribed it legally for depression, and then overdosed on it, because the problem with somebody who has an addiction and you're treating them, like obviously addiction and depression are very tied into each other, and you're saying, here, this is going to help you with your depression, well then maybe more will help me more. Or, okay, right now what my doctor gave me, but my friend has some, let me do that. And I think that's ultimately the problem, is like, you're still looking at why someone's going to that, whether they're legally prescribed it or not. That may not be where they're trying to go. So like, again, I think that, yes, you've seen it with psilocybin, you've seen it with like MDMA, you've seen it with ketamine, where they're using it really successfully for people with suicidal tendencies, things like that. But again, that's in a really clinical setting. What happens when it comes outside of the setting? Do you end up with a situation like with the Sacklers, where they had this pain medication, and before long, everybody's addicted to it. So like, really, that's why I want to address that, because I feel like you can't just throw a pill at depression. You can't just throw, like something at anxiety. You have to say, and they do quite successfully, I might add. But
I'm kind of blown away. Yeah.
Continue, Juliet. What were you? Finish your thought.
I was just saying, you have to address underlying causes in order to treat the problem.
Yeah, and I'm definitely I'm blown away by the fact that a lot of ketamine, from what I've heard, it doesn't necessarily treatments. It doesn't go with psychological assistance. Like,
I see.
A psychologist will refer you to do ketamine treatments, but there's not like somebody in the room with you kind of walking you through a process. They're like, this is clinical. You're put in this place. You do this for a little bit. You need to ride home. It's a whole thing.
So what happened to your leg?
Last year when I shattered it, I got
tell us the story.
Malleolar fracture. So I was hiking, and I was going down this hill, and they were doing a new trail, and so somebody had thrown loose gravel. I don't know why. That's the stupidest decision on a hill. I didn't see it until like right before my foot hit it, and my foot hit it and just turned it in and snapped off of my leg. Basically, it was just like a piece of chicken hanging at the end of my leg. And so, yeah, so I had to call 911, and they sent out an ATV and had to like.
Wait, where were you?
So I live near a reservoir, which has like a 3-mile loop around it. We're in the mountains. Yeah. So you go up mountains, you go down mountains, and we go hike that every Sunday. And this was just one of those Sundays, and I hit that part of the trail.
This is why you don't go to the mountains, I'm just saying. So you were hiking through the mountains of Georgia.
I was.
And, northeastern Georgia is a beautiful place. I've gone hiking over there. It's amazing. People can't drive. and there's no city, but
So
it's a scary place.
What bone did you actually break?
I broke all of them. So like that's called a trimallear fracture. You break all three bones. So you break both bones going down, and then I dislocated and turned my ankle bone upside down, and then there was another break. So they basically had to go in surgically, and I have all this metal in there now. They had to first put my heel back into place, and it sometimes slips out now, which is gross. Like I'll be walking and it'll slip just a little bit, and I'll feel it, and I'm like, oh. And then they put a screw through, like plates on either side, and a screw through holding both plates on either side of my ankle.
No, I know I'm just digging into this because I want to know. Hold on. So you've got your shit. Hold on. What is it? You got your humerus and your ulnar, and then it's the tibia and fibula, right? Did you break those, like the ends of those, the processes of the actual bottom of the leg?
Yeah, I broke both the bones, and then
the actual ankle, like
and then
the
actual
tarsal.
ankle, and I dislocated the heel bone turned upside down.
No.
So it was, yeah.
Fuck.
It was gross. It was, yeah.
Were you heel stepping? Like, what was going on?
So I was going down that hill, and like as I was going down the hill, and like it was washed out. So like it was dirt, and then branches, and I would use the branches as steps. And I stepped over one of the branches to where I thought dirt was going to be, and there was gravel, and it literally my ankle just went, and it turned like that basically. So that's why it snapped everything, and that's how the heel turned upside down.
Was it private property or public property?
It was public property. Yeah.
Did you get a payout? Is what?
I should have. I didn't.
Make a complaint.
I should have.
Because I feel like
because I wasn't the first.
I feel like whoever designed this trail has failed.
Yeah, they
weren't
and
the
they've
first
actually
person
since closed that part of the trail, and they moved around to a different part of the trail. So yeah.
Sure.
It's something, I guess.
One of my buddies, she was a runner, and something similar went down out of nowhere. Like, she's running, she just kind of fell. She slipped, on like algae or something was on the ground, and she was getting up, and her leg just was not attached anymore. I mean, I don't know what that is. I'm a little terrified because every so often I go on a jog, and I'm like, I'm gonna go jog today. And I'm like 42. Am I too old to be jogging?
If you
I
want
still go roller skating. I go roller skating every Sunday, so you just gotta get it.
Fine.
Yeah, but you're not jogging on. You're jogging on flat. You're not off
right. Well, you
on
assume
the trail.
it. You assume it.
I used to
you never know.
run up and down Runyon Canyon. That was fun.
Yeah.
You don't want to run up the hills of LA and down.
No.
That's super. It's just a big sandy dirt pile. So yeah, but if you're running in the valley, you're fine.
This, I keep on harping on it because I feel like if that were to happen to me, it would be a seminal moment that I would write about. Has it gone into your writing?
It has. I actually wrote a short story that 13 Podcast put on their show, which was about a woman. I made it worse, of course, because like you have to. So about a woman, she's the same thing. She's hiking, she breaks her leg, and then this guy comes to rescue her, except he doesn't have the best intentions. He ends up kidnapping her. It gets even really weirder. But so it did start with that, though, because I was like, I really want to write that experience and just put it into words, because it sometimes takes it out of your memory being like so gross. Like if I write it down, all of a sudden it's not like it's just in my memories. Yeah, so I sold that short story to 13 Podcast.
That's awesome. Do you do any audiobooks or anything with your stuff?
So Through the Surface, which is my horror book, has an audiobook. Haven't done it with others simply because of cost, honestly, and I won't do the AI. So
I was actually going to ask you. I was going to ask you about that next.
No, because I feel like I can't sit there and say we shouldn't use AI for writers, but hey, for audio narrators, it's fine. So I stand on my ethics on that one.
And there's nothing more. Nothing pisses me off more when I'm watching a YouTube video and I'm not really sure that it's the AI voice, and then they pronounce something just incredibly wrong.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is getting an instant down.
Well, it's like every website is like this. So there's this thing, you guys may have heard of it. Called Web 3.0. Have you heard of it?
Heard of it. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the Web 1.0, this is like the World Wide Web in 1995, right? Web 2.0, this is like the useful internet. So the internet is a treasure trove of information, and that information is potentially bullshit, but you have to suss it out for yourself.
Sure.
Web 3.0, this is when you get into AI, generated content, tailored content, to the point where the idea is, and you guys could probably extrapolate this yourselves, but the idea is when you open up the internet, you're only getting useful, relevant information to you, right? That's the goal. Now, of course, what does that also mean?
Other stuff is filtered out.
It means you don't get the information, right?
Yeah.
So it means someone is telling you what you get, and that's the only thing you see. This is the Web 3.0 thing. It's all blockchain, decentralized, and it's like more and more and more of these websites, you can tell they were created by AI because they describe just big descriptions of nothing, like buzzwordy type stuff. It's very beautifully written.
Nothingness. It's beautifully
just nothingness. Absolutely nothingness. Interesting. I was wondering about that AI book. I wrote a book, tabletop role-playing game, and I have thought about doing an audio book for it. It's 500 pages, or it's like 120,000 words, right? I mean, it's a big old Haas core book. So I was thinking about that, and then one of my roommates, she has this book she's written, and she was thinking about that. And I do voiceover audiobook stuff for people, and it's a big question that can you afford it as an independent author or as even a published author? So she's actually published, and she's like, it's not really worth it, to pay someone $2,000 to read this book, right? So what are your sort of thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, it's tough because it is expensive, and I think that looking at my first book was through Findaway, and so like you can go look at an audition, different people, and the minimum was really about $1,000. Now I knew the guy who did my audiobook. He's another writer. We're friends. I just really liked his voice. He does a podcast, so I did not pay $1,000. But I couldn't keep asking him to do it that cheaply either. Like it was kind of like a trade. Like I helped him with his stuff, he helped me with mine. That's why I haven't done it, because like I don't have that kind of money set around. I just don't. And then if you look at sales versus what you've paid, so you pay say $1,000, you have to make $1,000 in sales to have actually made it worth it. And as an indie author, that's pretty tough. It takes
especially when like Amazon, for example, if you put it on KDP or whatever, they just fuck around with your prices, and you have no control whatsoever. For DreadLore, which is the book that I'm shamelessly plugging, so the actual cost of the book, right, is like $40 some odd to literally print, plus shipping and handling to send, right? So it's a hardback tome, right?
Right.
I look on there, I get a bunch of people to review it. Boom, they're doing a discounted price, and they're selling it for $45. And I'm like, okay. And I get $1.
Yeah, how did they decide to do that?
They just do it. And you have no control.
I have a book they did it with now. Like I looked today and I was like, why is this book $2 less than what I have it priced for? Because basically I make nothing. Because I try to keep my prices low enough that people can afford it, but then I still make some money.
Consistent,
and, like, it gets
right?
Yeah, where I'm not making like that 50 cents.
So for example, the audiobook, you can buy audiobooks, sure, but if you get that Audible account, it's free, which means the author ain't getting paid.
Right.
Like Amazon doesn't just pay people, right? In fact, they're incredibly stingy and pieces of shit, in my humble opinion.
They are.
So I do have a question. It's a little bit of a pivot. Ken, do you have something to say before that?
Go ahead.
Writing style. what the fuck? It seems like you're very prolific, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you got pretty similar themes throughout, but the genres are like all over.
Yeah.
So your writing style, what is it?
So my writing style is character driven, forthright plot. So like I write a story, no matter if it's horror, it's sci-fi, it's whatever, it's going to be really character driven. So you're going to know those characters right off the bat, who they are, what they're thinking, their experiences. I'm not a flowery writer. I don't put in a lot of excessive description, or, you know, you're not going to get details about the meal they're eating or the doorknob, whatever it is. It's really going to be, I always think of it more like screenwriting, but in book form. You know, like I'm literally, when I'm writing a book, I'm seeing the images play out in my head and I'm just transcribing them. So these two people are on a beach, they're having this conversation. I'm transcribing it. I'm not going to get into the details of the freckle on her nose or the, you know, like I'm just going to tell you what I'm seeing. And so that carries across all of them. So I did ask a friend of mine, she's been my beta reader since the beginning, and she's a librarian. I said, tell me, does it seem off that I'm writing these different genres? She's like, no, your style's always the same. She goes, I know it's you writing it. Like, it's really clear who's writing it. You're just writing different genres. And even in my genres that are different, there's such a similarity in the style and how the characters are played out that I don't think it's that different. I've never really had anybody... I've had horror readers that only read horror, and they'll only read my horror books. But I've had other ones that have said, I'm going to go ahead and try your other books, and they've loved them because they said, like, it's really about how you write versus what you write. So
it's interesting that example you gave of writing is like writing screenplays or screenwriting, kind of like you're a director. You know, and a director can have multiple, you know, completely disparate movies that have a flavor. Right. Oh, that's a so-and-so movie.
Steven Spielberg, right. Like, it could be anything. It could be a story about kids over here or Alien. And, like, nobody questions that except for writing.
Right. That's interesting.
So you don't have a specific genre that you gravitate toward? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of travel in your stuff. And,
there's a lot of journey. So no matter what's happening, you're on some journey. But I technically am a cross-genre author, because even within a book that I write, I usually mix in more than one genre. So, like, for example, action, adventure, romance, or like in my horror book, it was horror book, you know, horror supernatural. In this latest book, it was really hard for me to even like pick genres. Like when I submit like awards contests and things like that, I was struggling to even know what to put, because I bring in, you know, you have this creature in the woods, you have, you know, this guy on this journey, you know, gets into supernatural stuff, it's a mystery. So I really struggled with trying to define it. So I tend to not want to define it. I know people are really, really committed to genres right now, but if you look at writing even 50 years ago, we weren't so addicted to like whatever genre we decided we're going to read. Like, I know people who only read horror. They won't, no matter how good a book is, they won't read it if it's not horror. I'm just not that way. I write the way I read. I'm going to read whatever interests me. That sounds good, I'm going to read it. It sounds good, I'm going to write it.
I'm going to ask a Bill question. So what is horror?
The definition of horror?
Define horror.
Continue.
So this is an interesting thing, because it's a conversation that comes up a lot in horror groups, and nobody ever agrees. So we'll start with that. Like, is there an actual definition? No. Because there's so many levels of horror that really you almost get into the subgenres of it. Like, I write what's called quiet horror. Like, I'm not a slasher person. I'm going to build up with the creepy, atmospheric type stuff. So that's that. Now, the difference between, say, horror and a thriller is usually like you find out about something. Like, somebody got murdered. You're kind of like on the sidelines watching and trying to figure out who got murdered. In horror, you're in it. You're with the character who's getting murdered. So, like, there's like a sense of being, like, say, horrified. But again, it's literally a question that causes so many arguments in horror groups that it's almost not worth trying to really define, except for, like, I write quiet horror. You're not going to get a lot of slash and gore out of my stuff. It's just not what I write. I want people to be creeped out. I want that atmospheric feeling. I want them to kind of like want to be looking over their shoulder. That's how I write. Is it horror? Yes. Is it the same as splatterpunk? No. But they're both horror.
And quiet horror, can you kind of go a little bit deeper into what quiet horror is. Is it like, because I presume it's not like Edgar Allan Poe where like he's talking and the shit's happening outside, or like, and it's clearly not Texas Chainsaw Massacre because that just sounds loud in my head.
Right.
What is it? Anxiety?
Yeah, it's feeling inducing. So like it will make you feel creeped out. It'll make you feel anxious. It'll make you feel, like I said, like somebody's standing behind you. You think of like, say, Shirley Jackson. She was probably more like quiet horror. Darcy Coates, she's quiet horror. So like you're telling the story, but instead of having like a scene where people are getting murdered every chapter, maybe they see a ghost or they feel something in the back of their neck, or like those type of experiences are quiet horror, because what you're doing is building a feeling or an atmosphere versus just laying it all out there.
And how do you set up that scene? Do you have words that you use, or
Never.
techniques?
Yeah, I mean,
clearly you have words, but it's like
right. The character's experience is going to tell a lot of it, like what they're experiencing at the time. Are they feeling anxious? Like, say, for example, one of the scenes in Through the Surface, like he dated this girl on the island. He goes back because he realizes, he probably shouldn't leave her there alone at night. And when he gets to the house, he sees her on a dock down by the canal. And he's like, why is she down there?
Place to be.
Right. And then he goes down there and she's not there. And so he runs back up, knocks on the door, and she answers the door and she's like, what are you doing back? And he's like, well, why were you down on the dock? And she's like, I wasn't ever down there. And so it's like that feeling of like, then what did he see? Who did he see? What's going on? You're building kind of like where the reader has to figure it out. And they start to kind of make their assumptions about things. And so those type of feelings is really what you want to do. So a lot of it's going to be through the characters' experiences, what they're going through, what they're feeling. But then you can also set up with atmosphere. Does the air temperature change? Are there sounds? Do they see things? So, but again, the goal with quiet horror is not to lay it all out there. You want the reader to be as much kind of on the path that the character is. Like they're kind of figuring this out as the character is.
I got a question about that. Please teach us, Dr. Rose. The idea being, so we do a live play. Do you know what I mean? It's a new term for me. A live play. A live play is where you are playing the tabletop role-playing game live, right? So like a podcast or that kind of thing. We do that on Mondays. And one of the campaigns is called The Red Writ. It's a horror game set in 1982 Detroit. And as you describe quiet horror, I realized, because I really dig horror games, and running horror games, that's actually the kind of genre it is. And it works very well with story-driven games, collaborative storytelling. Because, all the players, it's literally from their perspectives. Hey, you should play sometime.
I'll do it.
At any rate, there's a point where, you set up the atmosphere. You've everyone's done their things. They've seen certain things. You've built all that tension up. You've not been waylaid by Ken, doing something zany in the background and trying to burst the bubble. You've done all that, but there's a point where
fourth wall.
Don't you have to reveal the monster, whatever the monster is, and how does it not become a circus? Do you know what I mean?
So, yeah, I think that the reveal, it will exist despite the genre of horror. So whether it's a slasher horror, or it's quiet horror, when you finally get to that reveal of your creature or your monster, that final kind of confrontation, that's going to exist about the same. I think that's really where they kind of come together. So like say in Through the Surface, when they do finally confront this beast, this demon, that's where the action is in the story. Like the rest of the story has little bits of action, but it's a lot of building to that point, building tension, building relationships, and then all of a sudden it just blows up at that point. There's like a battle scene at the end of that book. And you can't really get around that. It's hard with quiet horror. You can't say, well, I'm just going to stay quiet the whole way through. Well, then you don't really have a climax. So You have to have that. So really the quiet part of it is the build up. And then you're still going to have that ultimate scene.
That's interesting.
But do you have any like go-to favorite like scary words? can you say like a couple of scary words?
Ichor.
Yeah,
I don't know what
phosphorescence.
to go to. I think whatever works in the story at the time. You know, I don't really have anything I always go to.
Or it could be a word just like dark, or cold.
Yeah, and what I tried, like dark is when you tend to use it, like dark or sinister, but like then they get overused. So like I use the thesaurus a lot. I'm like, what's another word for sinister? What's another word for like dark? To try to change that up.
The dark spoon crept.
The sinister.
Evil, like.
The sinister. Let's take a 5-minute break. I need to get some water and use the bathroom. So.
All right.
You guys cool for a 5-minuter?
Yeah, as long as it's about 10 minutes.
Yeah, so it'll be 10 minutes. When I say 5, I actually mean 10. You gotta be like a wizard, right? You always intend.
You intend to go back. Well, if we're back in 5, don't be surprised. But I'm gonna put 10 minutes on the counter because it's easier that way. We'll be back. and we are back in the Geeky Gamer Podcast. I do want to do a quick shout out to our Patreon folks.
Probably should,
because we like them and they're nice to us, and I think they signed up. And so because they signed up, we should give them a shout out. Tim Roberts, Daniel Hulker, Nostalgic, Natalia Cline. Thank you very much. If you want to join our Patreon, please do.
You want to give us money.
If you want to give us money,
we got a way to do that.
Because the production's not going to get better until we do a little better. It's there's a lot of technical problems this episode for me, and we're getting through it. But anyway, also thanks a bunch to the music from and score from all lowercase letters and Mr. Interrupt, Couchfire Media for the art and media production, as well as 3 Rubla Productions.
Whatever they are. Fucking awful people. Awful people.
Our guest tonight is a very prolific writer, Juliet Rose. Who's this other girl? I just got
is on the
Jessica Simpson. Thanks, Jessica Simpson.
Ken, fuck it up bad.
No, I mean, I sorry. Good morning.
Juliet Rose is here. She's been here the last hour and a half.
Yeah, Jessica.
Thanks for coming on, Juliet.
Well, I was just saying, if I had Jessica Simpson's money, I wouldn't be on here. So
yeah, for real.
Yeah. Well,
no, don't say that. We want you. When you get rich and famous, we still want you to be on here.
Yeah, we definitely want you to come back.
I'll grandfather you in for
that. For sure.
I wanted to give a shout out real quick to the chat, because the people on the chat have been chatting. Soupy Jones has jumped on. Mr. Buck Mudd had jumped on. As always, we love you guys tons. Megan, I know, has been on here and there. And yeah, if you're listening to this not live, hey, we do it live.
We do it
on
live.
Thursdays, exactly at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. Exactly. We talk about a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Very light topics. Nothing that triggers anyone.
No triggers at all.
Totally not contentious statements.
None at all.
We've talked about a lot already. Just to reiterate, Juliet, will you do a short reiteration of who in the hell you are?
Who in the hell am I?
Who the hell are you?
I am Juliet Rose. I'm the author of 10 books, ranging from contemporary fiction all the way to horror and everything in between. Like I said, I'm a native New Yorker, now living in the mountains of Georgia, which is much warmer, so I love that. And that's me in a nutshell.
And you're not a genre-specific writer.
I'm a cross-genre author, so anything, each book is kind of in a different genre, but also within the book, I usually combine a few different genres.
And the way you had described it before was your style of writing is character-driven. There was another term you used, and I didn't catch it.
Just plot forward, like so.
Plot forward.
Kind of in your face. Everything I do is just really. There's no like I said, I'm not a flowery writer. I don't really get into descriptions, or I'm not vague. I tend to just say what's going on.
So on that note, so Stephen King is right. Like he'll describe. I remember my brother told me once because he read it. Yeah, and like The Stand, he was like, "Dude, there's 8 pages describing some dude's cigar."
Yep.
So there's that kind, or like H.P. Lovecraft, who I really like his writing. As a person, he's a piece of shit, but his writing I liked. It's incredibly turgid, if we will, right? Very flowery.
Yeah.
On the other side, someone like what is it? Who wrote Dune?
Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert has been described as vacuous is the wrong word, but he leaves a lot up to the imagination. Do you have anything to add to this? Are you somewhere on that spectrum, on a number line, or how?
Yeah.
Do you even compare to those guys?
I mean, they're definitely running a different style, but I would say that, Stephen King is very much like, he is very descriptive. Like, I just read Fairy Tale, and same thing. It was like, I swear, pages about a fence, which was like a bit much. When I write, I'll give enough description so that the reader has a starting point, but I want the reader to make it their own story. So I want them to I might describe the character slightly, but I'll leave a lot of it up to the reader's imagination so they can make that character their own, or that home or that situation their own.
But you will do things like, and again, this sounds obvious maybe, but you will define things like their gender.
Gender, basic description, basically where they are. So if they're at the beach, I'll be like, there's a beach and there's a pier, but I'm not going to sit there and describe the way the sand feels and I'm not going to get into every little detail. I'm just going to give them enough to put them in the scene or to give them an idea of the character. So maybe the character's tall and their race. So I might say their race, then they're tall, or maybe there's like characteristics about them that are important to the story. Because again, I don't want to just put in extra stuff for space filler. I want anything I put in there. Right. I want it to be like, you're saying this guy's face is a certain way because it matters in the story. And then that's about as far as I go in description.
Does it move do you find it moves the pacing a little quicker? Are you can kind of get through some concepts faster because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that from the readers too. I mean, everybody that usually reviews will say, it's quick paced. It got right into it. There wasn't a lot of extra stuff. And so I write what I like to read. I really don't like to get bogged down in description if it's not important to the story. And sometimes it is. Sometimes you are describing something because it's important to that storyline or to that character. And so you do need a reader to know that. One of my characters is missing an arm in one of my books. It's kind of important to talk about that because it's part of the story, So right. That really, it will just depend on if I think it's important for the reader to know or not.
But if you're describing a magical moment or a horror scene, it seems like it would take time to kind of come back and describe those situations a little bit more. And in those situations, you do need to, because you do need to put the reader in that situation. So in a horror book where there's, he's in this lodge and it's creepy, you want to kind of explain why it's creepy. So I will give description there, what's creepy about it, why is he getting these feelings? But I'm not going to go into 2 pages of, the bookcase, which is not, because the reader has in their mind already what they're seeing. They're seeing what they've decided to create this space as. So I prefer that, because as a reader, I prefer that. I don't need you telling me everything. I have a brain, so let me use it.
What's interesting is, or I think, you'd mentioned at the beginning that you'd played the first edition or 2 of Dungeons and Dragons and had played it wrong or were bad at it. But in reality, as a game master myself, or an arbiter, if you talk about DreadLore, that's exactly the right mindset a game master, a storyteller is supposed to have. As in, I would wager, would be very good at running games.
Interesting. I never got to do that part, so maybe I like that more.
Because that's what it is. It's setting up the situation, and then your players fill in with their characters.
Right.
Now the old school
is a little different, basically.
Yeah, you're collaboratively storytelling.
And if you can give a briefer, more brief description, sometimes that allows for the action to happen quicker, because I think in a lot of these games, you want your character to talk and you want to participate as much as possible. So it's when it's other people's turns, you're just sitting there oh, I can't wait for it to be my turn again. I think that a lot of players do that. Unless you're the arbiter, in which every turn is your turn, so it takes a certain kind of creative to be able to pull off that kind of instantaneous, like we'll say live play storytelling in the moment. It sounds like you're very quick to write. Where do you find time to write, or are you a quick writer?
I'm a quick writer. So I wrote for decades, and I wrote a lot of nonfiction. I wrote for magazines, and I wrote for newspapers. And then I took a hiatus, because I got divorced, and I was raising my kids and having to work. And I didn't really feel like writing when I got home. I was tired. So I did a few magazine articles over like those years, nothing really major. And then I decided like it just hit a certain point in my life, and I was like, all right, I need to write. And so that was going on now 3 years ago. And in 3 years, I've written and published 10 books. And I'm working on my 11th. So plus short stories and stuff that I did in there. So like when I put my mind to it, that's my focus. It's just to really get it done as quickly as possible. I work a lot of things out in my head. Like, so for example, I have a story I'm working out in my head that I haven't started writing yet because I let it just kind of simmer for a while. So I get to the point where I discard things I don't want, keep things I do, maybe change it around. And so when I sit down to write, I'm usually like pretty well, like I know what I'm doing here. And I just usually write it within 30 days.
Yeah. How many pages a day is that approximately, you think?
About 8.
8? That's pretty good.
And your books, are they like US trade, like 6x9, around 200-300 pages, or what?
It's the 5.5 by 8.5, and it's around 300.
Oh.
I have one novella, which is a little over 100 pages. And I wrote that because it was supposed to be a short story. I sent it to that beta reader that I know, and she's like, nope, you need to expand this. It really needs to be like a novella, which really worked out well because I don't often have stuff for like teens that come up to the table. So that novella actually worked out really well because it's a little bit shorter, and I really kept any of the like adult content out of it. It is horror, but it's like, kind of like supernatural horror. So like
the YA style.
Right. It's more appropriate for like teens. And that's been good. I've had teens come up and I can be like, yes, this is a good book for you, so it's definitely helped having that. But everything else is around 300 pages.
So we're leading in beautifully, all according to plan. How do you promo? How do you distro?
Market.
That's where I start. I mean, it is like that. I just don't like selling myself. So I do a lot of podcasts, and I just I enter awards contests. And so like when I win those, it's a little bit easier to be like, hey, I won this award. So those are ways that I can do it without being like, hey, buy my book. Because I think there really is nothing more obnoxious than somebody that just, that's all they do is hound you to buy their book. And so what I do is I do market. I don't know if you know bookbrush.com. I'll make like, okay, bookbrush.com is great because you can make like little templates and stuff. And so I'll do those for the books. I shared one today on Instagram. I don't know if you saw it. Things like that, but not very often. Like once a week, I do a lot of in-person events. That's basically for the next like 12 Saturdays, I'll be at book events.
Now, is this a con? Like, not a con. Are you conning us? Is it like a convention or is it tell me?
It's a mixture. So like on Saturday, I'm going to North Carolina for like a one-day book fest in Lexington, North Carolina. I'm going
Lexington, North Carolina.
Yeah.
We're from Lexington, or I'm from Lexington, Kentucky. Is
Kentucky, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And then like next month, I'm doing a convention. I'm doing the Scares That Cares convention in Williamsburg, which is like massive, and that's like a 3-day event. Then like I'm doing a local book signing here at one of the bookstores. So just really wherever I can get in, because
you got the table, you got your books on the table. Do you have the like pop-up thing? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I have like actually have this.
Tell me your setup.
My books on. So yeah,
because
two of the like metal stands, and that fits all the books. And then we always have like stickers and buttons and stuff like that too. So we'll have like different things kind of displayed there. And then I did have like a, what do you call it? Like a banner, but I'm probably going to redo the banner that I had so that again catches the eye. Just try to get people to come over.
How do you do this artwork?
What artwork?
Yeah, like the artwork. Your cover.
You're a painter, aren't you? Do you paint your own covers? Or graphic artist?
Yes, I'm a graphic artist and I'm a painter. I tend to paint skateboards. That doesn't really translate into books. I just like painting skateboards because I like skateboarding. So I do a lot of, like, I'll use a lot of times photography, and then I'll take it in and I'll just keep altering it until I get it to where I want. But I
So
have
you do your
supported
own.
sometimes. So my latest By the Dimming Light, I found this really amazing artist out of Finland, I want to say, Eva Mount, and I had seen the artwork. I was in the middle of writing the book, and it just spoke to me, and so I was able to use that for the book. Another book, I have a few artists that have actually contributed to that as well.
What about copy? I'm sorry, Ken. I just have a couple questions about it.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
What about copy editing and formatting the book? Are you using InDesign? Are you using how are you doing all that?
As cheaply as possible. So I have, with every book I've used Google Docs. I'm really good at formatting, so I taught myself how to use it and format a book the same, because I looked at Atticus and Vellum and things like that too. But honestly, what they were offering was what I was already doing. The only thing I liked about Atticus is you can add images on their chapter pages, and I love that, like actual background images. And I may switch them simply for that because it's beautiful. But I taught myself everything. Like as soon as I'd be like, how should this be? I pulled books off my shelves. I looked at books. Everything to teach myself how to do it because I'm cheap. And then I have certification, both beginner and intermediate, from the Poynter Institute in editing. So I do most of my own editing. I'll usually have beta readers go over it to catch anything I might have missed as well. But that's pretty much my focus.
And it sounds like you have, go ahead.
You're saying that you use Google Docs and it's robust enough of a program to get it down to what you need it to be to then self-publish. I'm assuming you're using KDP?
I'm using KDP,
yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I had publishing contracts, and I broke them all. One company folded during COVID. One sent me a contract that I had to go to Write Everywhere, and I was like, it's just something about this is off, and she agreed. There was a clause in there that was definitely very sketchy, because they wanted do-over, and then do-over. All my books are standalones, except I do have a character in We Don't Matter that started out in do-over. But you don't have to read them together; they're still standalones. But I let them know that, and I was like, hey, just so you know, I have this other book I'm working on, that has a character from do-over, and they said, we would want to see it first, which is fine. That's pretty normal in publishing. They're like, but if we don't want it, nobody can have it. And I was like, that sounds wrong. So I didn't get that contract. And then the third contract I did sign, and regrettably so. He, during COVID, afterwards, he just quit paying his writers. He quit communicating with them. We had to get the Authors Guild involved. We had to basically have them draft up letters of termination for breach of contract. People are still chasing stuff down with him. But so after that, I was like, that's it. I'm done. I just can't keep doing this with people. So I'm smart. I figured out I could do it myself, and I did. And so then I started entering awards contests because I wanted to vet those books to say, oh, yes, I did this, but they're quality. And since then, I've won 47 awards. So I think I've vetted that.
Ken?
No, I was going to say self-publishing seems to be the way to go. I know a lot of musicians that decided to go the self-publishing route, and it's just like the publishers, a lot of times they'll take your money, just like Amazon. But I don't know, maybe you get a better percentage when you go through a large corporation like that. I really don't know anything about publishing.
The thing about Amazon is it's free to submit to them.
Yeah.
And if you do you own your own? Maybe this is actually stuff you don't want to say or not. But I'm going to ask, do you own the ISBNs to your book, or are you getting the KDP versions? Yeah.
No, I bought mine. So, I went through Backers and bought everything.
Yeah. So will you actually walk us through that really fast? Because people that don't publish don't know anything about what we just said.
Sure. Yeah. So, you can go through KDP and they can provide an ISBN, but when they provide that ISBN, they own that ISBN. When you can then buy ISBNs in your own name. And so I started my own publishing company, and I bought my own ISBNs through Bowker, Bowker.
Which you have to go through Bowker.
Right. And you can do other things through them too, like copywriting and stuff, but you can also do that outside of that because, again, I'm cheap. I only do the things I have to do. But with Bowker, you can buy lots of ISBNs. And I did, because obviously we have publishing, and I knew it was me publishing a lot of books, which does bring the price down. And then you own that. So then if you decide to leave Amazon and you want to go somewhere else, you own that ISBN. It goes with you.
Right. Right. Okay, so there's all that. The thing with KDP, or KDP is Kindle Direct Publishing, I believe, and that is their form. That's how you submit to Amazon. It's free to do so. It's just then you don't have control of whatever they do. So you can do something like you can go through Ingram Sparks, right? So they're these distribution people. You're not stuck with Amazon, but each one, like, you got to manage all of them. If you get payouts, if you're lucky enough to get payouts, then you got to deal with all that yourself. How have you determined where you distribute?
As far as why I picked Amazon versus Ingram Sparks?
Do you do them both?
Don't do them both. And this is initially why I didn't. So when I came back to this, and I had written a book back like 20 years ago. When out of publication, I just was, just took it out of publication. That was after my divorce. And I was like, I just want to be done with this for now.
Yeah.
So when I came back to this 15 years later, to start again, everything had changed. Nothing was the same.
Right.
I used Lulu the first time. I think they still exist, but they're just not.
They do. I used them.
You did? Okay. So,
and
so I looked at, the reason I went with Amazon initially is because of the ISBN issue. A lot of people don't know this. So like with Amazon, if you publish a book, you find an error, you just go and fix the error, you republish it. Nothing changes. You don't have to get a new ISBN. If you go to Ingram Sparks and you publish the book with an ISBN, and then you find an error and you want to change it, you have to then buy another ISBN and resubmit it. It becomes another edition.
Epic. Yeah.
So that's why I didn't, because I was like, I'm still new at this. I'm relearning the game. But in this year I published another writer's book, and I'm publishing an anthology of 14 other writers. So like now I'm looking at Ingram Sparks, because I'm like, okay, I've really kind of figured out what I needed to do, worked out the kinks. They just have better distribution. They're more legitimate. Like Amazon is Amazon. And if you go to a bookstore and you have a book that's been published on Amazon, the first question they're going to ask you is, did you publish through Amazon? If you say yes, they don't really want anything to do with you. You have to provide everything. So if you want to do a book signing, you bring your books, you run it yourself, etc. And some of them won't even touch you because they see it as being not legitimate. For Ingram Sparks, you can get into libraries, you can get into bookstores, just better distribution. But again, ISBN, you better know what you're doing, because once you submit that book, you have to resubmit, get another ISBN to resubmit it through Ingram Sparks.
So with Lulu, I've done a few different versions through Lulu on DreadLore core book, and the same ISBN worked. With Ingram Sparks, I didn't try. I did them last. So I've gone through KDP, Ingram, and Lulu. There's some public libraries that have been like, hey, can I get my book in here? Just to have it there, right? And sometimes they use that distribution service, sometimes they don't. I know, or I'm pretty sure that Borders / Barnes & Nobles, I think they use Ingram Sparks.
Yeah.
I think. Anyway, it's this whole mind-boggling thing, and it's like, how do you get the reviews, the legitimacy, blah 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 blah, all that stuff. Very difficult.
I think you have to decide what you're going into it for too. Like you have to say, am I looking to be like famous off this? Am I looking for whatever? For me, I just really wanted to write. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I had stories in my head I wanted to put down. Of course, I want to make money at it, at least like to break even. That's kind of important. But I'm not somebody that's necessarily trying to get on your shelf everywhere. That would be great. But like I have a friend, she's like, we should, because there's a new Barnes & Noble opening here. She's like, we should try to get in there. I'm like, you can't. Like, the first question they're going to ask you is it through Amazon? And they actually just came out recently. Barnes & Noble was starting to kind of open their doors and say, let's get more indie authors, let's bring them in. And then all of a sudden they were just like, let's stop doing that. And they shut that program down. And so we're kind of back to zero with Barnes & Noble when it comes to that. Now, if you're through Ingram Sparks, you can probably go in and be like, I'm an author, through Ingram Sparks, here's my book. They can look it up. Now, I'm on the Barnes & Noble website. I'm on Books A Million. I'm on Amazon. I'm on whatever little book online. I'm everywhere. But it's really hard to cross into a brick and mortar store unless they're independent. And they've been great. I mean, I have a lot of independent stores that are like, just, give us it. We'll pay you a commission or whatever. And so that's where my focus has been.
So the poor man copyright, is you mail it to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Apparently the poor person, I'll be inclusive, poor people's way of getting into the brick and mortar specifically for Amazon, is you roll in and you're like, hey, do you guys have this Juliet Rose book? And if they're like, oh no, I don't. Oh, could you get one? And you don't pay for this. Like they order it, it comes in, and then your book's there.
Yeah.
So
Typically,
driving across country, I went to all of these Barnes and Nobles. I was like, hey, do you got that DreadLore book? I'll be back.
Right, and that's ultimately they're like, and now I think that's one of the reasons they've gotten like what they really couldn't do, because they say the reason that they won't get them in there is because of Amazon's return policies, which could be true. You know, it's very hard to return books, and you know, unfortunately, I think they're getting a little more particular. And I know some people said they've had to pay up front to order a book from, say, their book from Barnes and Noble. They have to pay because now they're just making sure they get their money out of it. That's what it all comes down to.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want your book to be pulped. That's annoying. Okay, so that's all that stuff. Artwork, how to promo, distro. One of my buddies, I did the audiobook for him. Saturday Shepherd in the World Beyond.
Before you move on, what about e-readers? What are your thoughts on e-readers? I know that there's some, like if you're on Amazon, you're not necessarily you might get on a Kindle or whatever Amazon's e-reader is, but you won't get onto other e-readers. Is that something that you try to get on to the different platforms for those things, or is?
Yeah, it's tricky because one, you can't be enrolled in KU if you're trying to get into anybody else. So you can not be enrolled in KU, which takes you out of just their exclusive. And you don't want to do the digital rights management for the same reason, because it makes them exclusive. But then you have to literally reach out to, say, Barnes & Noble or whatever, and try to convince them to get your book into, say, the Nook or whatever. So yeah, it's Kindle and Amazon, Nook is Barnes & Noble. I haven't tried. Honestly, I do really well on KU. I actually make usually more off KU for a book than I do for selling it as an ebook. So I've just let it ride.
Well, the thing about Kindle, so making an EPUB or whatever, you can submit your book to Kindle, and you might have to click the little box, right, that says, oh, you can only do it through them. But so long as that you're distributing the digital form of your book in a different format, it's okay. Like, for example, as a PDF, right? So you can sell PDFs through certain sites, and PDFs don't even have ISBNs, right? Actually, I'm not sure, but I don't think ebooks do.
They don't. Yeah. So when you do an ebook, you can put an ISBN on if you want, but it's not required. So like I don't. Like I said, what I do, I make sure that I never click the digital rights management, because again, that gives them kind of exclusive rights. I do have it enrolled in KU, but I can take it at any point that I want. Like I said, when you have in KU, then that's exclusive to Amazon. So if you want it to not be exclusive, so like there's Godless, which is for horror ebooks, you wouldn't want to have it on KU. You'd want to have it out, but then you could get it onto a site like Godless, where people can buy it there as well.
Yeah. Okay. My notes. Adverbs.
Thank you.
Prepositions.
What do you think about adverbs?
Adverbs are just words. I mean, like, again, anytime you overuse anything, it gets annoying. So you just have to balance everything you do. I know there's the people don't ever use adverbs. I mean, sometimes an adverb just makes the most sense. You could go through this long description to do exactly what an adverb did.
Really?
And that slows down the pacing of your story. So, again, do what you want. I mean, people definitely sometimes use too many. You gotta be like, hey, maybe lay off on those a little bit.
Lay off the adverbs.
Yeah, but I mean, I would never say don't use them, because sometimes they make more sense.
And in prepositions, that leads to like, what do you think about Merriam-Webster changing it up, saying that's okay at the end of a sentence?
Again, I think it depends on just how the flow is, because my biggest thing when I'm writing a book is flow. Like, does it flow? And sometimes the way a sentence is, worded this way or that way makes more sense, even if it isn't appropriate.
It is appropriate now.
Right. Well, they're saying it's appropriate, but I'm saying like the rule, and that's the thing. Rules always change, and I hate when writers get so bogged down in the rules, because like ultimately that stops you from just writing. Just write, and then obviously you'll have to tweak some things. Like I'm big on making sure I don't use repetitive words. Like I don't use like that, like the word dark. 3 times on a page because that's annoying. So then I try to look up different words. That's still just personal preference. And that's what it all comes down to. Your personal preference and the reader's personal preference. If you have readers that are reading and enjoying your story, it doesn't really matter what the rules say.
Oxford comma or no?
So that's a tough one because I used to say no. Now I say yes because sometimes if you don't use it, it actually makes a different sentence. So it just depends
I love
on
the
what
Oxford
you're trying to
comma.
write. Yeah, I use it now.
Are you a semicolon gal?
I prefer semicolon over the double dash. What is that called? The M dash. Hate them. Hate them.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's where people just use the double line, like the line instead of a semicolon or a comma. But some people use it so much it makes me insane. And to me, it's very fragmented when people do that. Where a semicolon is more fluid. So I tend to stick with that.
Interesting.
What are the little curved lines that enter the 9 and the 0? What are those little parentheses?
Parentheses?
Not parentheses. Yeah.
Brackets?
No, brackets.
No, those are parentheticals.
Are they? They're parentheticals. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're thinking of curly brackets and square brackets. Parentheses.
Yeah, they are parentheses.
Do you put the period within it or outside of it?
Never. You never put it inside. I mean, you can have a sentence
There's
inside
a rule.
there.
There's a rule.
Inside the
What do you
parentheses.
say?
I think it would have to be a complete thought within it in order to do the period.
Yeah.
It's usually a parentheses adding an extra thought onto an existing sentence, so then you would do the period after. You would have to have a complete thought within the parentheses to use it, like a complete sentence within that to use it.
But she's a fast writer, so parentheses. How many parentheses do you have in your book?
I really am not huge on like extra punctuation for no reason.
It took me a minute to be like, wait, you ass. Do you say et cetera or et cetera?
Et cetera. Et cetera.
Et cetera. Indeed. All right. Back to gaming. Now, all of the people that are listening to this podcast, before we started recording, Juliet and myself were talking about geeky stuff, specifically my t-shirt. Star Wars.
Your favorite movie?
And we got onto this a little bit. We got on to Dune. The Dune part right? Dune part Dune. Juliet, what are your opinions on Star Wars, Dune, and I don't know, something random like Firefly?
Star Trek.
Okay, so I'll start with Star Wars. I was one of those kids that stood in line when Star Wars came out in the theater. So I was hooked, loved it. I loved, the original movies a lot. We'll just stop there. And then as far as
No, by all means, what are you talking about?
No, I mean the other ones are good too, but I feel like they never really quite caught the essence of the original movies. Like there was just something.
Yeah.
That something's
heavy,
called
but
sucking.
Heartfelt. Yeah, no. And the later movies were entertaining, but they definitely lacked some of that, for me.
Right.
Dune I loved. I mean, Dune was definitely, I saw the first one. It was amazing. A couple years ago.
Oh,
great. And then
I was going to say that first, the Lynch version was
I saw that one too. I was like in 8th grade. I don't have as much of an opinion on that, I think, because I was pretty young. I can't be like, yeah, it was amazing. I remember seeing it, and that's it. But
I loved it.
then I saw
Here's the quiz at Satarak. I'm just saying.
It had a lot more excitement. There was a pizzazz.
The soundtrack's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
for
Yeah, go ahead. I feel like we're interrupting you completely.
No,
this is how we roll. Yeah, please continue.
No, that's what we do.
Yeah, so then I just saw Dune 2.
Yeah, what'd you think of it?
I loved it. I think that Austin Butler, though, really stole it. I said that before. I think we were chatting.
This is the dude who plays Thade.
Yeah, and honestly, I think he owned that movie, which was amazing. It was really good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought that they caught the essence of it, and I'm glad they're kind of splitting it out so there's more story to tell versus trying to cram it into an hour and a half.
I liked. My favorite version was the Sci-Fi Channel version. I thought that was really good.
I never saw people have talked about it. I've never seen it.
It is the most in-depth book-wise. Like I felt the first Dune was really like it had was beautiful, and it was kind of stretched out, I guess. It was kind of slow. But it didn't get into the politics, and I think that the politics of the sci-fi version really, really, that was a nice feel. Like if you'd read the book, it certainly, and they did 12, or they did a bunch of episodes of
I don't think I saw it. I don't think I saw the serialized version.
I think it's on YouTube.
Huh.
So I mean, and they do a good job. Special effects of the time.
What year was that from?
It's 90s, mid 90s.
Okay, I haven't seen
it. It's all standard def.
Star Wars. What's good about it?
I think at the time it was so unique, it kind of blew everybody's mind. Like when it first came out in the 70s, like that was something. I mean, I begged to go see it, and then I would literally go as different ones came out. I would go by myself to the movie theater because it was so different. Like, and it really appealed to a different aspect of what was out at the time versus, books definitely were covering sci-fi and stuff like that, but to actually see something on the screen, I remember like, this is the 70s, so I was like, when is it going to be on TV? And they just laughed at me because back then, never going to be on TV. So like, honestly, I think that was the aspect of it. It was a really human way to present sci-fi, which I love, is in a way that you feel like this could be somebody this could be a story that you're familiar with versus something that's just really out there. And I think it was really authentic. Like, I think the way it was presented was just, he wasn't trying to do a lot of bells and whistles initially. It was just this story, this really good, meaty story that was told in a way that was really approachable.
What sucks about the later ones?
I think some of the authenticity got lost for special effects. Like, it's okay to be a little cheesy and really authentic if that's really going to carry the story. And I think sometimes, especially now in Hollywood, what we see in movies is a lot of special effects that sometimes take away from building that story.
And the newest ones, have you seen any of them?
Last one I saw was Rogue One.
Oh, what'd you think?
It was decent. I mean, I wasn't blown away. I didn't go watch it again like I did when I saw the original ones. I would go back to the theater. I didn't go back. I saw it and I was like, it was good. But it's not something I necessarily felt like I needed or wanted to see again.
But there's a time element to these. The newer ones were made pretty quickly, I would imagine, and the older ones, I think they spent they had a lot more people working on it. They had a lot more time that it literally took because technology. They were inventing the technology as they were making the projects, and so it was a team effort. Whereas now, I mean, I work for Disney. It's team effort. I mean, that's what it is. You're working with a group of people, but you're also making a living, and it's a factory. And that's the difference where, you've got a deadline and a quota and a time. And I think they were just in it, those guys in the 70s. Certainly, it was art and cinema, and it was story, and there was excitement.
So bringing that into something that you're actually geeky about, which is, writing, right? Have you felt a push or a pull or whatever to be more like a factory, as in you found your audience and you're like, and that's what works?
Not at all. I have this, it used to hang in here. It's a little embroidered thing that says, don't tell me what to do. That is literally me in a nutshell. Like, you can't if you tell me to do something, I'm going to do the opposite. So ultimately, I'm just going to choose to do what I want to do at the time. So when I'm writing a story, initially I'm writing because I want to write it. Obviously, eventually it gets handed up to the reader, so you have to take that in mind. But like when I'm doing it, it's because that story's in me and I want to get it out, however it comes out. I've had people say, oh, you should write more of this, or you should write more of that. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not going to do it. Like, I'll do it if I want, but otherwise I'm not. And that's ultimately, like, every time I sit down to write, I'm feeding my soul initially.
What do you? So
go on.
Yeah, go on. You're stepping into a new genre on your next book. You kind of did a little drop, and it sounded like you were interested in science fiction and going into space.
Into space.
And a lot of your books, it seems like they're hiking around. Are they going to be on a spaceship? You don't know. Are they going to be hiking around on another planet dealing with gravity?
So it's definitely going to be sci-fi meets magical realism. So it's going to start out on an island with these kids, and they don't know. They've always been on the island, but they're basically kind of owned by this woman with this giant toad. And there's a robot already. Yeah, there's a robot there that basically kind of helps take care of things, but the kids realize that the toad, getting into like that, is secreting stuff that they're being basically fed to keep them docile and on the island. And when the one kid realizes that, he stops consuming it, like when he realizes that's what they're doing, and he's befriended this robot, and so he knows they want to make an escape. And so it's going to be on this world, but kind of not. Like it's going to be kind of like this world, but in that magical realism sense where maybe it's not.
What's the? I don't want to ruin anything. Where the fuck does that come from?
That was actually from a dream I had. I dreamed about this woman with this giant toad on her shoulder, and I woke up and I was like, I have this idea for the story. And I don't often have things from dreams, but it was just I woke up and it just really appealed to me. I was like, that sounds good. So let me build a story. That's cool. Yeah, that's where that came from.
That's like Alice's Adventures. Very, very dream-like. That's really cool. I dig that.
And I love Lost in Space, but I love Lost in Space because of the robot. Like it's just something I love. The Iron Giant. And so I really wanted to incorporate that as well, because it's something that's always really spoken to me.
Yeah, the Iron Giant is the bomb. So Into Space is the other campaign that we do, and it's if you mixed like the Aliens universe with Starship Troopers. Have you seen any of that stuff? Yeah. Do you know Warhammer 40K?
I've heard of it, but I don't know details.
So it's where Grimdark comes from, and the idea of, Warhammer 40K, it's literally 40,000. The year is 40,000, right? Like, it's just ridiculous. This would be like Warhammer 2,500, right? And the story is there are a bunch of space marines that are in a fascist society and they don't know it. And they're sent on missions to go deal with shit. And it's up to the players to decide, do you continue on? Are you affected by what you're having to do? That's completely and utterly right. And kind of digging around on that kind of stuff. So it's one of the things that I really enjoy about TTRPGs is a lot of the players, are the dregs of society and reprobates. But the other part are creatives. That was funny. The other part are creatives, and they're actors and authors and musicians and everything. And they usually find some way to incubate their ideas from playing these games, which is, I think, really, really interesting. They say George Lucas, that's complete bullshit, but he plays D&D, surely.
Does he?
Surely. No, probably not.
Probably not.
He might. I don't know. Vin Diesel did.
I mean, I bet
Vin Diesel did the Iron Giant.
I bet they do. I bet he does improv.
George Lucas.
Yeah, I'm sure he does some improv.
He probably could. He's, whatever. Kind of a funny guy, I suppose.
What? He could have done. I mean, maybe not. Because, I think Star Wars 1, 2, and 3 wouldn't have happened if he did improv.
Oh. Juliet, other than authoring and painting skateboards, which is interesting. Tell me about that. What?
Well, growing up, I skateboarded. I was a really odd kid. I was on my own a lot, and we were poor. And so other than the other thing I would do, so it took up skateboarding, because the other thing I would do was to run in front of cars to see how close I could get to them without them hitting me. Not a good decision. So then I bought a skateboard, and I babysat and got a $10 skateboard at this little shop. And so I skateboarded. I loved it. It was just something that really, really made me feel connected to the world I was in. Now I roller skate. I don't really skateboard as much, especially with my ankle, because it won't move as much as it should for a skateboard. So I started painting skateboard decks because I just really still enjoy skateboards.
Huh. I need more. What?
Yeah,
What are you painting on these skateboard decks?
Anything. I'm going to have ones where I've done skulls and snakes. I have ones like I currently have one that's like a octopus smoking a cigar, and then like the skateboard's painted like a cigar, so it has like the bands at the end. You know.
Do you have a website for them, or how do you? Are they just lining your walls? Like,
yeah, no, I used to, and I had a shop, and I would sell them there, and I sell them at events sometimes too, depending on how I'm setting up. But they've kind of gotten pushed to the wayside just recently. But eventually, I'll have them back out in a shop and stuff like that too.
So you have a history in sales. You going and going to places with your book and talking to people and having conventions like selling your books. You have a past in sales. This is not the first time that you've gone around trying to. Did you go? Or you said you had a shop, so it was just a brick and mortar.
Yeah, so here in town we have these shops where like you ran like kind of like booths, and then somebody manages the front end. And so I had a shop, and I sold like skateboards and books and jewelry and that kind of stuff there. I actually just closed it at the end of last year. Prices went up, rents went up, so I decided not to. Yeah. We actually are looking at. We have a cabin on our property, which is right by the highway. Maybe making a shop out of that. Same thing, books, art. And then I do events. So like I said, I do events as often as I can, coming into busy season now. March through basically May are busy.
Yeah, Lexington Comic and Toy Convention is going on right now.
Right, yeah. Everything is right now.
Did I catch that you were a journalist at one point, or you just wrote for magazines? And
yeah, I wrote for magazines and newspapers, but I did it freelance.
Okay. And what was the subject matter if you...
It just depended on what they needed. Sometimes I wrote
hardcore.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it was boring stuff like what's going on in town, or sometimes it was an article about something. I wrote a lot about cancer because I lost a child to cancer, and so I wrote a lot about that journey and my experiences with that as well.
Yeah, cancer's tough.
Why'd you write for cancer? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, so I lost my mother when I was 11 to cancer, but then I also lost
to cancer. I see.
4-year-old daughter to cancer as well.
Oh,
so
Jesus
I felt like
Christ!
it was something I wanted to write about to let maybe people feel heard, or give them different resources.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's a hard thing.
Cancer fucking sucks.
It's not.
Yeah, it does.
It's everywhere. But yeah, that's a tough. Have you written any? I guess you've written a little bit on that subject.
Yeah, I do it within fiction now. So what I might do is weave some stuff into the character's experience. I do write about grief quite a bit in my books because it is something I've dealt with. So kind of creating, characters who are going through maybe those experiences as well.
Sure. And do you have any advice for people going through some grief or going through?
Yes. There really isn't any advice. Honestly, just breathe in, breathe out, because there's nothing that makes it better. I mean, I'm going to be honest. You can have all the support, you can have all the community and everything, but like the fact is, you're just going to go through it.
It just fucking sucks.
It does.
It does. It's terrible.
So, there's a slew of questions. Now, I asked you if you didn't want to talk about anything.
I'm fine talking about anything.
All right. So, the death of a parent to cancer, that's a bitch. That's a big old bitch, especially at a young age. So, how has that come into your creative? How's it? We've been talking about you being an author all night, so we'll stick with that. How's it come into that? How's it played out in that? I know you kind of just answered that, but anything specific?
But there's actually different levels. So when my mother passed away, she was also a single mother. So with my brother Scott and I, our brothers were being raised by our father, who we didn't know. So it was just my mother, my brother, and I. This is our little group. And then she died very quickly. So she was diagnosed and died 2 weeks later.
What kind of cancer was it?
She had leukemia. And we think she knew, because now looking back at letters she had written her mother, we think as a nurse she knew what was going on, and she also knew that there wasn't really much of a chance. So she, at that time, bought the RV, loaded us up, and we went to Mexico. So I think a lot of that was kind of like her bucket list type.
Yeah.
came back, and about a year later, she passed away, and we were shuttled around to like different family members. So I had like a lot of experiences: people that did want us, people that didn't want us, abuse, things like that. Moved out on my own at 16, and so now, like when I write, it defined me a lot as a person, not just because of her death, but because of our situation when she died. So she was a single mom. We really wouldn't want any place. I really kind of went into this like bubble for most of my childhood. It's just like isolated in a bubble. That's how I existed around other people. A lot of that comes into my stories because I want my characters to be really authentic in what they're going through. So if they're going through grief or they're going through a hard thing, we're not all amazing and don't have the right words to say. Sometimes we're assholes, and sometimes we're selfish, and sometimes we shut down. And so I really wanted to use those experiences in my characters. So quite often in a story, if a character's going through something, they don't come off that great, because you know what? You don't come off that great. A lot of times you're just ready to like lash out at everybody. And so I wanted to really carry that through.
Are your characters likable?
Sometimes they're not, and sometimes I think we're not all likable. I have days where I'm likable, and I have days where I'm like that bitch, so I want to make sure my characters have that. Like my character in Do-Over, she's not really likable initially. She becomes more likable, but initially she becomes
more likable.
Right.
So that's a thing. So I do some acting, and one of the ideas is, even if you're playing the villain, there's got to be something, if not redeeming. You don't want to just fucking hate the person, because then the audience doesn't want to see that person, right? So is that something that you think about?
Absolutely. I like a villain that you can relate to, and it's rare that I have a villain that is just, in this last book I had one that was completely unlikable, but most times I do stuff where maybe there's something about them that you maybe relate to. Even if you don't like him, you're like, I kind of see where they're coming from, or I've kind of been like that before. I want to make them relatable even if they're not likable.
Yeah, having compassion, I think, really rounds a character out, or finding empathy with that terrible individual. For sure, it helps. I wanted to go back just a little bit. When you said, because you've got these characters, are they the ones described, like Adian and Zeke, or are these the heroes, correct? Or the guys that fall in love are always the heroes, and then the villains are
your protagonist,
a third party somewhere else. It's not that the two main characters are against each other. It's always these guys kind of coming together and going against something else. It seems like there's a team up or a connection. Is there a reason that you pull like this team together? I mean, it's that they use their flaws maybe to overcome or what they've learned to approach these villains? Do they need that? Is there
I think sometimes, and it depends on each story, but like say with We Don't Matter, we have Aiden and Zeke and they come together. Part of it is because Aiden would never be able to do something on his own. Like he's dealing with the death of his brother, which doesn't take place in the story, but it takes place previously. He's still dealing with that. He's really like still not kind of coping in the world. Zeke's been on his own, so he has like the personality where he's like confront things, but he needs to be tempered, right? So like sometimes building those teams is to create that, and you want to have flaws. I don't think you should ever have a character, no matter how likable they are, that is not flawed. They should always be flawed because we all are. And so like working with their flaws and working with their strengths, they become a stronger team. And so that's typically why I usually have them team up like that.
What's an example?
Was the villain of the police, or was the villain someone like an authority figure like that in this particular piece?
There's a few, because sometimes your villain isn't a person as much as it is a belief or it's a thing. So like what you see in We Don't Matter is kind of like this belief of certain people not having as much value as other people. And that's really, so they are going against police. They get confronted on the street at one point because they are gay, so like they get harassed on the street. Then confronting Zeke's past of, you know, being a child raised in a church that, you know, saw homosexuality as a sin and wanted him to go through conversion therapy. That's also a villain. So like sometimes the villain can be those beliefs, and the people aren't, like, you never meet, say, Zeke's parents or the people of the church because you don't need to, because this is now in his past, but you know what he went through and what his parents put him through and the church put him through. That becomes the villain in that situation.
Was this inspired by like Breonna Taylor and a lot of the protests at that time? Or was this before that? Because I know that Black Lives Matter has been going on for a long time, and I would imagine there's a connection between,
right? Michael Brown.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah, it was a mixture of things. I think, you know, it was just kind of, it came to a head, I think, with George Floyd for me, because it was like, it's never going to end. It was like that feeling of like, oh my gosh, this just keeps going on and on. So it wasn't necessarily triggered by one specific event, but rather the series of events. And like, that book really came to me. I was laying in bed one night and I was just like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I don't know where my power is here to try to stop these things from happening. Post online all you want. You can do whatever you want. The fact is, you're not gonna, you're really not reaching people. And so like, I was like, how can I reach people in a way that isn't preaching? And that's where I was like, I could write a fiction story. And through these characters going through these experiences, instead of being like, this is happening, people feel it because the character feels it, but they're not committed because the character is not real. But eventually, like, it does help change perspective. And I had people reach out after I wrote that book. And I was really afraid of like death threats after I wrote that book, because I kind of go after the police and go after the church. And like, I'm like really going after things. But I've actually had really positive response from people that are like, you know, that really helped me kind of see things differently or have another perspective. And so that's really why I try to do that.
Ken knows what you're talking about.
So, are you in that?
Well, let me qualify. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ken. Let me qualify that really quick. The reason I said that is because Ken has had death threats.
Yeah, no, I've had
as in I agree with you. I just realized that could be.
I was running a very liberal, progressive podcast at the height of 2020 and COVID. And yeah, people did not let.
Right. I support you.
I was really surprised I didn't get, because I live in the South too. I was really surprised I haven't gotten that yet. Grateful, but like I was really actually a little worried putting it out, because I was like, am I really putting myself and my family like on the mark, because I live in a small town, people know who people are. I haven't run into any issues.
I think there's a difference between fiction and nonfiction. We were strictly nonfiction and covering and active, and we were active on the internet, but we would actually be active in real life and do that stuff. And so like, I don't know, that we don't matter. I mean, that book, you know, I'm definitely gonna check it out. It speaks to me because of a lot of the connections that I had to what was going on in 2020, and I just you know, arrives because we, you know, when we did, like, there's a pride parade in Lexington, and there would be these big trucks with the diesel, and they would screech, and it would become this intense event where there was definitely threatening involved, and to a large group of people. And I think that's true through the South. Do you think that in the last 4 years it has diminished, or do you think it has increased issues like this,
or something else?
It's kind of something else, right? Because like it hasn't diminished. We're hearing about it less. Does that mean that we become more desensitized and it's not a big news story anymore when stuff happens? It's kind of like school shootings. That used to be like a school shooting and like that's all people talked about for like weeks. Now, sometimes you don't even hear about them. I hear one person say something. So I think that like we as a society have gotten, and I'm not saying we're desensitized as much as we're just not being shown stuff because the news doesn't see it as a big story anymore. What's their big story?
Web 3.0, baby.
It's true.
But yeah, and I was going to say, just to give a proper on We Don't Matter, the cover was actually a photographer who went to the Oregon protests after George Floyd. He took that
wow.
photo. His name is Austin. And I, for some reason, just blanked on his last name, which I'm sure he's going to love. Granger, Austin Granger. He took that photo. I found him online. I was like, hey, can I please use this? So it's an actual photo. And if you look, you'll see somebody flipping off. And what it is it's protesters flipping off the police. So when you look at that,
the Oregon protests, Seattle protests, there were some really violent ones. That
can you find?
They ran right after they took it. They had to run because they were being chased. I don't know.
Can you find that hashtag or whatever it is?
What was the hashtag?
Twitter or whatever. I'm not sure. I wanted to fact check myself really quick. I said BLM started in 2015. It didn't. It's according to Wikipedia. It's 2013. Because of the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the shooting death of African American teen Trayvon Martin. So I wanted to give a little bit of that.
And he wasn't even a police officer. He was just
some dude.
A guy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Now I have my own
danger ground
shit about all that, but who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. So there's it goes right into all of my notes. It's like I planned it.
Hey, so my computer's about to die. I'm going to move to a different location. So if I disappear, I'm just moving real quick. So
do it.
All right.
I want to talk about mental illness and social issues.
Yeah.
I think we're on social issues right now. So
yeah, we're definitely in social issues, and I think lot of.
Go on.
I think that a lot of what we deal with in role playing is social issues and mental illness. So
absolutely.
I don't think that's why people originally started role playing, but I feel like we start delving into that stuff as we progress.
You express ideas. You express ideas,
and you're allowed to express ideas.
Yeah, because you're role playing.
Because
you're not exactly.
I
mean, is it safe?
One of the things I've always wanted to understand better is the other side. So playing a character like Dolby, it's playing a character like the other side.
Yeah.
And that's in our into space scenario. So if you can. I don't have the hate, because there's no hate in the futuristic space, and so that's a whole other detail. But I feel like I should let you. That's a different area.
This is totally different.
I had to find an outlet to go through. So
I love it. Look at that dude.
There's a puppy. Yeah.
Who's that dude? Tell us about the dude. Kaya.
See if she'll come up here. Come here. Hey.
Oh, a sweet puppy.
Just sniffing me.
What kind of dude is that?
She's just a mutt.
She's a moot.
Something mixed. So yeah.
I love it. I like the hardwood.
Yeah, it's actually probably laminate. I don't know.
Well, it looks cool. Is that a cord phone in the background there?
It looks.
Or is that like a purse?
A purse, yeah.
It's a purse.
And a loom. It looks like you've got a loom.
Do you have a loom?
No, I don't have.
Oh,
no looms. It's a cool lamp. It looks like
it's a way cool lamp.
Actually, I found it at Goodwill for $12, and when we brought it home, we found it was a Dale Tiffany, which was worth like $2,000.
What is a Dale Tiffany?
It's like some, I guess, designer from back in the
day.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah!
I just liked it, and it was $12. I was like, oh.
Whoa!
Yeah, right on. Thrifting. My girlfriend.
Yeah, I feel
thrifting.
Like why write books when you can buy Tiffany lights?
Why not? So what we were talking about is the idea of social issues and then mental illness. Holy shit, it's a whole lot. Are you good, Juliet? We've been on for 2.5 hours. Are you good for another 30 minutes?
Yeah. Good.
Maybe 45.
That should be good.
All right. Okay, so social issues, we're going to get into a lot of controversy, I'm sure. Because you all are likely more liberal than me. So, we're going to get into this. It's going to be good. some of your books, maybe all of your books, do they have to do with social issues? That is an idiotic statement. When I say social issues, I'm qualifying that as the kind of things like BLM.
Yeah. I think probably to a degree they are. I mean, I think that sometimes the social issue is primary and sometimes the social issue is secondary. So like saying like we don't matter, social issue is primary. But I can do over the social issue is secondary. Social issue being family trauma and ketamine abuse in small towns, or basically problems in small towns with drug use in general. So that becomes more of a secondary issue. But all of them probably have, to a degree, an issue, you know, that I felt it was important to address.
I have not read your books. Sorry. What are those two titles about? I know you've talked about them. We've talked about them a little bit, but just for people that are listening, what are the books about specifically in their social issue? So like, we don't matter. I actually do know, but I want you to say
the social issue in We Don't Matter is obviously kind of two things. One, it's the main character finding out, or, you know, not finding out, but discovering that he's gay, you know, that coming out. And then him having to really kind of just adjust to that world. The second probably issue, obviously, is the police brutality. And that, like I said, that came because I wrote that story after George Floyd. It was just something I wanted to address. And then... Something's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, and then obviously getting into the church abuse as well, which is kind of more secondary because it's not a major part. It's really just something that they talk about once they're kind of running from the police. Do over the social issue is, well, there's two within that, which is small towns. I mean, small towns and being a young person in a small town, there's not a lot of opportunity. You can see higher drug use, things like that. So I really want to address that because I've lived in a lot of small towns and I want to address kind of like that element. And then, of course, the ketamine abuse. And one of the characters basically being addicted, but also selling ketamine.
So we come from Kentucky, and as you may know, there are no drugs in Kentucky whatsoever.
No meth? No meth in Kentucky?
No bath salts. There's no pills of any sort. It's interesting.
I had a cousin that died relatively recently because of issues with meth and mental illness. So yeah,
it's an interesting subject that not everyone can get behind. Not everyone understands it, right?
Right.
I don't understand it personally. So being a millennial, many people were, I've been in Los Angeles too long. I'm qualifying my statements. Everyone, go back to my Kentucky roots. Everyone was this way. Into ecstasy or Molly, you know, they're all candy kids and this kind of thing. They all did the reefer. They did it. They rolled. They were rolling, not roll in. They were rolling, right?
On a river.
And in my mind at the time, drug use was just ubiquitous. So, but it wasn't immediately destructive. It's what people did for fun. Right. And they went and did it, but I was in the dark ages. I was in a whole different thing, but I wasn't a part of that. I would sort of like lurk in and be there and witness it. But I wasn't a part of it. I had no judgment based on it. Now, some of my friends, they were in, Eastern Kentucky, where you have whole communities that are destroyed by it, right?
Right.
What are your guys' experiences? What are your thoughts on all that? Go.
So, I mean, I think that living in the South, and I'm not bashing the South by any means. I'm just saying, having lived in the South, lived in small towns, there's definitely, obviously, you see meth a lot. I actually served on a grand jury a couple of years ago in our town, and that was an eye-opener to how much meth is a problem in this town. it's just prevalent, and part of it is, you get into, like, again, you have to look at, like, poverty, you have to look at experiences, what people have accessible to them. And I do think that's part of the problem in small towns, is that there isn't a lot accessible. It's not accessible when you're a kid. There's really nothing to do, so you look for stuff to do. And as an adult, a lot of times you're working crap jobs for crap pay, barely making ends meet. So sometimes the appeal of taking something that erases that reality for a while is there, but then it overtakes. Like,
Yeah, they close the coal,
want.
man. I understand.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think that some people don't intend to go into it full force, but they're like, I'll try it this time, or I'm partying this time, right? And then it becomes.
I've incited Ken.
Well, not only did they close the coal mine, but they got injured while working in the coal mine, needed an opiate, or were prescribed an opiate in order to have some pain relief, and then
got addicted.
They were overprescribed. It kept going,
right?
Because they were just like, there were no issues with opioid related. The Sackler said that they were not addictive, and then they were addictive, and then you're like, you can't get opium anymore. So what do? You get heroin, you get meth, you get other things that. It's not just, I don't have anything to do with my life. It's the fact that, when there are a lot of people that are injured, and I have, in Kentucky, I know 2 or 3 close people to me that I'm related to, and many more friends that had issues that were definitely relating to. I think that we're definitely. I play a character on one of the games that we in the DreadLore system that is a drug addict, and I think I do it in order to give myself some perspective and some empathy for what people around me, or to process things. I don't know really entirely.
It's the horror game. And what's really interesting to take it back into like sort of a fiction idea, which will be interesting to hear your perspective if you have one, Juliet. They're experiencing in the Red Writ, they're experiencing stuff that is Cthulhian type stuff, right? So again, H.P. Lovecraft, to preach to the choir, the idea that when you truly see what is the unknown, it crashes through, your existence, your reality, and that can cause a kind of insanity. And so it's really interesting, the different players, and specifically his character, Nord Zetterberg is his name. He will dose himself with opium or cocaine, or whatever he has access to in 1982 Detroit, to deal and to be an adventurer. Because, it's a TTRPG, so he's trying to kill the bad guys. But there's this question that occurs, is any of this real? And then, holy shit, we have committed deplorable acts. And I think that's where the horror exists. Okay, I just said a whole lot. What are your thoughts?
All right, so on both things, I was just trying to think about what you're both saying. So kind of talking about using things to step out of our own worlds. And then you were saying whether or not it's real. And I think that's a big part of it, is like people that are dealing with addictions like that are trying to step away from the everyday, whatever is making them miserable. Is it real? No. Like, we're going into a fantasy state, right? When we're stepping into an addictive state is a fantasy state. So ultimately, no, but it's still real because you're going through it. So it's a distraction at best. It doesn't change anything.
It's an interesting perspective you have, because you've come from, and please argue with what I'm about to say if I'm wrong. You've come from an existence that has experienced addiction.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And that's why I say it, because, like, again, you're using the addiction to step outside of the reality, but you're not really getting out of the reality. You're just temporarily masking it, but you're still in it.
So So from my perspective, which is different, I do the thing, call it an academic perspective or theoretical. I say, oh, well, who's to say what's real and what's not? This line of thinking. How do you know? Right? How do you know what the truth is? Now this doesn't hold water. I know it doesn't hold water, but I'm poking in different ways. What are your thoughts on it?
You don't. I mean,
I love the dog. I love the dog, by the way.
Yeah, she's ready to go to bed. I was going to say that.
No, I love her.
They're about to run through, so I'll have to mute when they do because they're about to go to bed. Yeah, but yeah, no. I mean, I think that ultimately it's not the truth. What you're doing is fooling yourself or lying to yourself to cope.
To cope with what you have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is, like, addiction comes from a place of coping, you know, and sometimes it's coping temporarily, right? You know, just trying to get through tonight, trying to get through the next 10 minutes, trying to get through the workday tomorrow. But it's not actually getting rid of anything. You're still just going to have to, you know, once you push out to that point.
Is it procrastination?
Absolutely. Right? Because the problem's not going away.
It's interesting.
The problem's still there.
And in that regard, it's fantasy. That's why it's fantasy. Right. Ah, that's interesting. Now, Nord Zetterberg, I'd say he's an addict. But I don't think he's using opium or whatever. Ken, you're going to have to speak to this. I don't think he's using opium to cope with the devil being thing that he's dealing with.
No, he's chasing the tail of a dragon. He's using opium to go deeper into, to see more, and to be to validate his own issues. Like it's he's using it so he can see that creature. Like,
Juliet, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, it definitely serves that purpose, right? Because again, it goes into that fantasy. You know, you're going into something. So whether or not you're doing it intentionally to see something fantastical, you're stepping out of your reality, it's still putting you into a fantasy state.
Go on.
But as he goes along, it's like looking back, it's like he just becomes more shallow in time, it seems like.
I'm still here. I'm just moving.
No, yeah. So one of the things, I was working a coffee shop job many moons ago. And I came in hungover. This older guy came in, and he's sitting there, and he's like, "Hey, you're not running on all cylinders, are you?" And I was like, "No, man, I'm hungover." And he says, "You know, you're an artist." And I said, "I suppose." And he goes, "You're an artist. It's very easy for artists to use these chemicals because they think that it makes them bigger. But actually it diminishes you." Holy shit, she's back.
Yeah, they're about to go through it, so I was making sure I wasn't going to get run over.
But it's interesting. I know people that will utilize, like, they need to be in an altered state because that allows them to focus. That like shuts off, you know, the voices will say. And then they can do the thing that they want to do. And what this guy was saying was actually using those chemicals and whatnot, it diminishes you. It puts your brain to sleep.
Right.
But
in the end, it's deleterious.
Yeah. And gathering from the way you write, it seems like you don't currently do drugs. So you're writing from past observation, or, you know, from that world. So it's funny. We were at a concert, Bill and I, a few months ago, and there was a guy in the audience. It was a Q&A. There's a guy in the audience, and he said, "How you must be doing a lot of drugs to get your music to do all this and do all the visual effects." And and the artist was like, yeah, I don't touch it. I don't need to touch it. You know, it's like, that's, if I was on drugs, I wouldn't be doing anything.
Yeah, I was never creative. If I was drinking it, I would think, oh, I'm gonna relax and drink something, and then I wouldn't be creative. I would just decide to do something else, like nothing. Listen to music or watch TV, or So whenever I've been creative, even when I did say drink, I never did when I was creative, just because it would take away from that for me.
It definitely dulls things. We would play music and would drink, and it definitely loosens you up. But there's a point where it doesn't. We had a show. It was a day show. Never do a day show. The sun is bad for you.
The sun is terrible.
And we're hanging out, and everybody's like, let's do tequila shots. That's a stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
Delicious, but stupid. Don't fucking do it. It's awful. So it's like,
Never make good decisions on tequila. So.
It's like noon. Were you a table walker, or what did you do on tequila? I don't want to revel in tequila, but I'm just wondering.
I almost burned a bar down one time. Yeah.
Yeah, barn fires are bad.
Yeah, I thought I'd been clever and took a candle that they had sitting on the thing, and I slid it down the bar, except it just tipped over and caught all the alcohol in the bar on fire, and they kicked us out. So. Not a good decision.
Yeah, that's bad. That's a bad one. Why were you in a barn drinking with candles?
I don't know. It was a comedy club, actually. And so, like, one half was the comedy club, the other half was the bar. So after the comedy show, we went over to the bar half, and they had candles there. And
it was in a barn?
Bar.
Oh, bar. I thought you said a barn. I was like, what? Why were you in a barn? Although it's a cool idea. Cool.
It's a cool idea. Yeah. I'm sure it's not. It's been done. But yeah, so definitely didn't make good decisions. I wasn't really like a in-your-face kind of person. I usually just did stupid little things that,
Yeah. But that's what gets you. That's what gets you. It's wild. It's kind of like what we were talking about before. You're running along, and then your leg gets broken.
Right.
And that's how it is with everything. It's like, oh, you're good, and then you don't see it coming. Why do you wear your fucking seatbelt to get all what am I, stereotypical? Because you get into the wreck and you fucking die, or whatever it is. Right. You wear the seatbelt. So we took tequila shots, and in the end, we all decided this is a bad idea. I was on the drums. I'm not a drummer. Old dude on the bass. He doesn't play bass. Some guy's singing. We don't know who he is. Like it's like a dissociative.
It is.
And it was awful. It was awful. It wasn't cool. We weren't like, ho, that was a cool time. No, we were never invited back.
Yeah, back in the day, so work at a bar, and we had karaoke, and the people would get up there and they would just be like belting it out. They were so amazing, and then they could get a tape of what they did, and of course they're all really drunk.
Yeah.
They do back the next day, and they're like, "I listened to that tape. Why did you let me do that?" I'm like, "I'm just the waitress." Like, I'm not doing
That's right, dude.
He was like, "I thought we were amazing. We were like ready to start a band." I'm like, "Yeah, it was pretty bad."
See, that's the thing. Our perspective,
right,
is not, oh, I'm going to get on the soapbox. We're social beings, Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's social issues. I had maybe one or two other things to say, but okay. Maybe one question. Is it worth it? Is it just catharsis? Is it virtue signaling? What's the point of if we're doing fiction, are we trying to teach people something through osmosis directly? Like, what's the point of doing it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, because I was nonfiction for so many years, and then I switched to fiction. Some of it is, like I said before, it's to present an idea in a non-threatening way to hopefully open people's minds. Now, for me personally, why do I write? Because I love it. Like, it makes me feel whole when I write. So again, if it's like I don't make $1 million off my books, I'm still happy I did them because, I'm doing this, the initial part, I'm doing it for my soul. And then I put it out to the readers, and ultimately they're still going to make that decision whether or not they want to read it. That's up to them. I can't control that. I can only control why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm doing it because I love it. And like that's why I think musicians play to a room of two, and things like that, because like ultimately you're still doing it because you love it.
Right. Yeah, if you don't, maybe anything. People often talk about creative endeavors like acting, for example, like moving to Los Angeles to become an actor, for example. And they say you better love it. But it's kind of everything.
Yeah.
Like everything we do, you better love it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to find, especially with creativity, like I have a day job. Everybody, like, where you have your day job that you do that because you're going to make money. I don't want my creativity to be that. I want it to be something that is a break from that. And I made the mistake the first time I did write, and that's why I didn't write for so many years, because I ruined it for myself. I was pushing so hard to sell books that I started to hate writing. And so this time around, I was like, I can't do that. So that's why when you said marketing, I kind of laughed, because like it is where I struggle, because I don't want to get back in that situation where I feel like if I haven't done this amount of marketing a day, that I failed. Because then when I go to write, I'm going to resent writing because it makes me feel like a failure.
Absolutely. So with this podcast and the one we do on Mondays, the live play one, and the fucking chess podcast I do, I suck at chess. I have a podcast.
Are you guys good for another 15 minutes? I got a thing I got to do.
I'm actually my computer's gonna die. I probably got another 5 minutes for.
Got 5 minutes. The long and the short of it is I agree with you.
Got a thing that's gonna take more than 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, then do we need to wrap it up, or do you want me to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think wrapping it up would probably be good.
And I'm fine. Yeah.
All right. Ken, ask the last question, and we'll give Juliet Rose the last thoughts. Do it.
Okay. You should ask. I got something going on.
All right, then we'll do it this way. What do you want everyone to know? Go.
About life, yeah. About me, that I write books, and you can find me at authorjulietrose.com. But about everything else is like, just take time to be a kind person. Life's shitty enough as it is. Like, just find those ways to support other creatives, to support each other, to just reach out. Someone's struggling, just try to be that person for them.
Fucking A. All right, Ken, you want to lead us out?
Yeah, thanks a bunch. Author Juliet Rose. I look forward to reading your books. I know a couple of people that are prolific readers that I think might enjoy the content that you create, and I definitely look forward to hearing from you again soon. If you have any interest in reliving a non-bullying role-playing game time, I would recommend joining us on a random Monday night sometime in the future and playing a game of DreadLore. It's an adjective-based role-playing game with relatively rules light. And the goal is to have fun, not murder kill you. So,
that sounds like fun. Just send me a link at some point. I'll probably just observe the first time, like watch. Yeah. Like, okay.
There's plenty of. We definitely. Well, we stream every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time zone. Exactly as when it comes out. Not 7:12. Exactly at Monday. But thanks a bunch for joining us. Thanks for the music from all lowercase letters. And
thanks all.
Interrupt. Thanks to our Patreons, Tim Roberts, Daniel Holker, Nostalgic, and Nadia Cline. Natalia Cline. I could say it, Natalia. I apologize. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, Couchfire Media and Twa Replay Productions for all the stuff you do. It's been a really fun getting to know you, Juliet. And do you have a last word?
Juliet Rose. Thank you very much.